Chapter 41. Paternal Affection. Whilst this terrible scene was passing at Lord de Winter's, Athos, seated near his window, his elbow on the table and his head supported on his hand, was listening intently to Raoul's account of the adventures he met with on his journey and the details of the battle. Listening to the relation of those emotions so fresh and pure, the fine, noble face of Athos betrayed indescribable pleasure. He inhaled the tones of that young voice as harmonious music. He forgot all that was dark in the past and that was cloudy in the future. It almost seemed as if the return of this much-loved boy had changed his fears to hopes. Athos was happy as he had never been before. "And you assisted and took part in this great battle, Bragelonne," cried the former Musketeer. "Yes, sir, and it was a fierce one. His Highness the Prince charged 11 times in person. He is a great commander, Bragelonne. He is a hero, sir. I did not lose sight of him for an instant. Oh, how fine it is to be called Condé, and to be so worthy of such a name. He was calm and radiant, was he not? As calm as at parade, radiant as at a fete. When we went up to the enemy, it was slowly. We were forbidden to draw first, and we were marching toward the Spaniards, who were on a height with lowered muskets. When we arrived about 30 paces from them, the prince turned around to the soldiers. 'Comrades,' he said, 'you are about to suffer a furious discharge, but after that you will make short work with those fellows.' There was such dead silence that friends and enemies could have heard these words. Then raising his sword, 'Sound trumpets!' he cried. 'Well, very good. You will do as much when the opportunity occurs, will you, Raoul?' 'I know not, sir, but I thought it really very fine and grand.' 'Were you afraid, Raoul?' asked the count. 'Yes, sir,' replied the young man naively. 'I felt a great chill in my heart at the word fire, which resounded in Spanish from the enemy's ranks. I closed my eyes and thought of you.' 'In honest truth, Raoul?' said Athos, pressing his hand. 'Yes, sir.' At that instant there was such a rataplan of musketry that one might have imagined the infernal regions had opened. Those who were not killed felt the heat of the flames. I opened my eyes, astonished to find myself alive and even unhurt. A third of the squadron were lying on the ground, wounded, dead, or dying. At that moment I encountered the eye of the prince. I had but one thought, and that was that he was observing me. I spurred on and found myself in the enemy's ranks. 'And the prince was pleased with you?' 'He told me so, at least, sir, when he desired me to return to Paris with Monsieur Chatillon, who was charged to carry the news to the queen and to bring the colors we had taken. 'Go,' said he. 'The enemy will not rally for 15 days, and until that time I have no need of your service. Go and see those whom you love and who love you, and tell my sister de Longueville that I thank her for the present that she made me of you.' 'And I came, sir,' added Raoul, gazing at the count with a smile of real affection, 'for I thought you would be glad to see me again.' Athos drew the young man toward him and pressed his lips to his brow, as he would have done to a young daughter. 'And now, Raoul,' said he, 'you are launched. You have dukes for friends, a marshal of France for godfather, a prince of the blood as commander, and on the day of your return you have been received by 2 queens. It is not so bad for a novice.' 'Oh, sir,' said Raoul, suddenly, 'you recall something which, in my haste to relate my exploits, I have forgotten. It is that there was with Her Majesty the Queen of England a gentleman who, when I pronounced your name, uttered a cry of surprise and joy. He said he was a friend of yours, asked your address, and is coming to see you.' 'What is his name?' 'I did not venture to ask, sir. He spoke elegantly, although I thought for his accent he was an Englishman.' 'Ah!' said Athos, leaning down his head as if to remember who it could be. Then, when he raised it again, he was struck by the presence of a man who was standing at the open door and was gazing at him with a compassionate air. 'Lord de Winter!' exclaimed the count. 'Athos, my friend.' And the 2 gentlemen were for an instant locked in each other's arms. Then Athos, looking into his friend's face and taking him by both hands, said, 'What ails you, my lord? You appear as unhappy as I am the reverse.' 'Yes, truly, dear friend, and I may even say the sight of you increases my dismay.' And De Winter glancing around him, Raoul quickly understood that the 2 friends wished to be alone, and he therefore left the room unaffectedly. 'Come, now that we are alone,' said Athos, 'let us talk of yourself.' 'Whilst we are alone, let us speak of ourselves,' replied De Winter. He is here. Who? Milady's son. Athos, again struck by this name, which seemed to pursue him like an echo, hesitated for a moment, then slightly knitting his brows, he calmly said, I know it. Grimaud met him between Bethune and Arras, and then came here to warn me of his presence. Does Grimaud know him, then? No, but he was present at the deathbed of a man who knew him. The headsman of Bethune, exclaimed De Winter. You know about that? Cried Athos, astonished. He has just left me, replied De Winter, after telling me all. Ah, my friend, what a horrible scene. Why did we not destroy the child with the mother? What need you fear, said Athos, recovering from the instinctive fear he had at first experienced, by the aid of reason. Are we not men accustomed to defend ourselves? Is this young man an assassin by profession, a murderer in cold blood? He has killed the executioner Bethune in an access of passion, but now his fury is assuaged. De Winter smiled sorrowfully and shook his head. Do you not know the race? Said he. Pooh, said Athos, trying to smile in his turn. It must have lost its ferocity in the second generation. Besides, my friend, Providence has warned us that we may be on our guard. All we can now do is to wait. Let us wait. And, as I said before, let us speak of yourself. What brings you to Paris? Affairs of importance which you shall know later. But what is this that I hear from Her Majesty the Queen of England? Monsieur d'Artagnan sides with Mazarin. Pardon my frankness, dear friend. I neither hate nor blame the cardinal, and your opinions will be held ever sacred by me. But do you happen to belong to him? Monsieur d'Artagnan, replied Athos, is in the service. He is a soldier and obeys all constitutional authority. Monsieur d'Artagnan is not rich and has need of his position as lieutenant to enable him to live. Millionaires like yourself, my lord, are rare in France. Alas, said De Winter, I am at this moment as poor as he is, if not poorer. But to return to our subject. Well, then, you wish to know if I am of Mazarin's party? No. Pardon my frankness, too, my lord. I am obliged to you, Count, for this pleasing intelligence. You make me young and happy again by it. Ah, so you are not a Mazarinist? Delightful. Indeed, you could not belong to him. But, pardon me, are you free? I mean to ask if you are married? Ah, as to that, no, replied Athos, laughing, because that young man, so handsome, so elegant, so polished, is a child I have adopted, and who does not even know who was his father. Very well. You are always the same, Athos, great and generous. Are you still friends with Monsieur Porthos and Monsieur Aramis? Add Monsieur d'Artagnan, my lord. We still remain four friends devoted to each other, but when it becomes a question of serving the cardinal or fighting him, of being Mazarinist or Frondist, then we are only two. Is Monsieur Aramis with d'Artagnan? Asked Lord de Winter. No, said Athos. Monsieur Aramis does me the honor to share my opinions. Could you put me in communication with your witty and agreeable friend? Is he much changed? He has become an abbé, that is all. You alarm me. His profession must have made him renounce any great undertakings. On the contrary, said Athos, smiling, he has never been so much a musketeer as since he became an abbé, and you will find him a veritable soldier. Could you engage to bring him to me tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock on the Pont du Louvre? Oh, exclaimed Athos, smiling, you have a duel in prospect. Yes, Count, and a splendid duel, too, a duel in which I hope you will take your part. Where are we to go, my lord? To Her Majesty the Queen of England, who has desired me to present you to her. This is an enigma, said Athos, but it matters not. Since you know the solution of it, I ask no further. Will your lordship do me the honor to sup with me? Thanks, Count, no, replied De Winter. I own to you that young man's visit has subdued my appetite, and probably will rob me of my sleep. What undertaking can have brought him to Paris? It was not to meet me that he came, for he was ignorant of my journey. This young man terrifies me, my lord. There lies in him a sanguinary predisposition. What occupies him in England? He is one of Cromwell's most enthusiastic disciples. But what attached him to the cause? His father and mother were Catholics, I believe. His hatred of the king, who deprived him of his estates and forbade him to bear the name of De Winter. And what name does he now bear? Mordaunt. A Puritan, yet disguised as a monk, he travels alone in France. Do you say as a monk? It was thus, and by mere accident, may God pardon me if I blaspheme, that he heard the confession of the executioner of Bethune. Then I understand it all. He has been sent by Cromwell to Mazarine, and the Queen guessed rightly we have been forestalled. Everything is clear to me now. Adieu, Count, till tomorrow. But the night is dark, said Athos, perceiving that Lord de Winter seemed more uneasy than he wished to appear. And you have no servant. I have Tony, a safe if simple youth. Halloo! There, Grimaud, Olivain, and Blaisois, call the Viscount and take the musket with you. Blaisois was a tall youth, half groom, half peasant, whom we saw at the Chateau de Bragelonne, whom Athos had christened by the name of his province. Viscount, said Athos to Raoul as he entered, you will conduct my lord as far as his hotel, and permit no one to approach him. Oh, Count, said De Winter, for whom do you take me? For a stranger who does not know Paris, said Athos, and to whom the Viscount will show the way. De Winter shook him by the hand. Grimaud, said Athos, put yourself at the head of the troop, and beware the monk. Grimaud shuddered, and nodding, awaited the departure, regarding the butt of his musket with silent eloquence. Then, obeying the orders given him by Athos, he headed the small procession, bearing the torch in one hand and the musket in the other, until it reached De Winter's inn, when, pounding on the portal with his fist, he bowed to my lord and faced about without a word. The same order was followed in returning, nor did Grimaud's searching glance discover anything of suspicious appearance, save a dark shadow, as it were an ambuscade, at the corner of the Rue Guénégaud and of the quay. He fancied, also, that in going had already observed the street watcher who had attracted his attention. He pushed on toward him, but before he could reach it the shadow had disappeared into an alley, into which Grimaud deemed it scarcely prudent to pursue it. The next day, on awaking, the Count perceived Raoul by his bedside. The young man was already dressed, and was reading a new book by M. Chapelain. "Already up, Raoul?" exclaimed the Count. "Yes, sir," replied Raoul with slight hesitation. "I did not sleep well." "You, Raoul, not sleep well? Then you must have something on your mind," said Athos. "Sir, you will perhaps think that I am in a great hurry to leave you when I have only just arrived, but have you only 2 days of leave, Raoul?" "On the contrary, sir, I have 10, nor is it to the camp I wish to go." "Where then?" said Athos, smiling, "if it be not a secret. You are now almost a man, since you have made your first passage of arms, and have acquired the right to go where you will without consulting me." "Never, sir," said Raoul. "As long as I possess the happiness of having you for protector, shall I deem I have the right of freeing myself from a guardianship so valuable to me. I have, however, a wish to go and pass a day at Blois. You look at me, and you are going to laugh at me." "No, on the contrary, I am not inclined to laugh," said Athos, suppressing a sigh. "You wish to see Blois again. It is but natural." "Then you permit me to go. You are not angry in your heart," exclaimed Raoul, joyously. "Certainly. And why should I regret what give you pleasure?" "Oh, how kind you are!" exclaimed the young man, pressing his guardian's hand. "And I can set out immediately." "When you like, Raoul." "Sir," said Raoul, as he turned to leave the room, "I have thought one thing, and that is about the Duchess of Chevreuse, who was so kind to me and to whom I owe my introduction to the prince." "And you ought to thank her, Raoul." "Well, try the Hôtel de Luynes, Raoul, and ask if the Duchess can receive you. I am glad to see you pay attention to usages of the world. You must take Grimaud and Olivain." "Both, sir?" asked Raoul, astonished. "Both." Raoul went out, and when Athos heard his young, joyous voice calling to Grimaud and Olivain, he sighed. "It is very soon to leave me," he thought, "but he follows the common custom. Nature has made us thus. She makes the young look ever forward, not behind. He certainly likes the child, but will he love me less as his affection grows for her?" And Athos confessed to himself that he was unprepared for so prompt a departure, but Raoul was so happy that this reflection effaced everything else from the consideration of his guardian. Everything was ready at 10 o'clock for the departure, and as Athos was watching Raoul mount, a groom rode up from the Duchess de Chevreuse. He was charged to tell the Comte de la Fere that she had learned of the return of her youthful protege, and also the manner he had conducted himself on the field, and she added that she should be very glad to offer him her congratulations. "Tell her Grace," replied Athos, "that the Viscount has just mounted his horse to proceed to the Hôtel de Lens." Then, with renewed instructions to Grimaud, Athos signified to Raoul that he could set out, and ended by reflecting that it was perhaps better that Raoul should be away from Paris at that moment. Chapter 42. Another queen in want of help. Athos had not failed to send early to Aramis, and had given his letter to Blaisois, the only serving man whom he had left. Blaisois found Bazin donning his beadle's gown, his services being required that day at Notre Dame. Athos had desired Blaisois to try to speak to Aramis himself. Blaisois, a tall, simple youth, who understood nothing but what he was expressly told, asked, therefore, for the Abbé de Herblay, and in spite of Bazin's assurances that his master was not at home, he persisted in such a manner as to put Bazin into a passion. Blaisois, seeing Bazin in clerical guise, was a little discomposed at his denials, and wanted to pass at all risks, believing, too, that the man with whom he had to do was endowed with the virtues of his cloth, namely, patience and Christian charity. But Bazin, still the servant of a musketeer, when once the blood mounted his fat cheeks, seized a broomstick and began belaboring Blaisois, saying, "You have insulted the church, my friend, you have insulted the church." At this moment Aramis, aroused by this unusual disturbance, cautiously opened the door of his room, and Blaisois, looking reproachfully at the Cerberus, drew the letter from his pocket and presented it to Aramis. "From the Comte de la Fere," said Aramis. "All right," and he retired into his room without even asking the cause of so much noise. Blaisois returned disconsolate to the Hôtel de Grand Roi Charlemagne, and when Athos inquired if his commission was executed, he related his adventure. "You foolish fellow," said Athos, laughing, "and you did not tell him that you came for me?" "No, sir." At 10 o'clock Athos, with his habitual exactitude, was waiting on the Pont du Louvre, and was almost immediately joined by Lord de Winter. They waited 10 minutes, and then his lordship began to fear Aramis was not coming to join them. "Patience," said Athos, whose eyes were fixed in the direction of the Rue du Bac. "Patience. I see an abbé cuffing a man, then bowing to a woman. It must be Aramis." It was indeed Aramis. Having run against a young shopkeeper who was gaping at the crows and who had splashed him, Aramis, with one blow of his fist, had distanced him 10 paces. At this moment one of his penitents passed, and as she was young and pretty, Aramis took off his cap to her with his most gracious smile. A most affectionate greeting, as one can well believe, took place between him and Lord de Winter. "Where are we going?" inquired Aramis. "Are we going to fight, perchance?" "I carry no sword this morning, and cannot return home to procure one." "No," said Lord de Winter, "we are going to pay a visit to Her Majesty the Queen of England." "Oh, very well," replied Aramis. Then bending his face down Athos's ear, "What is the object of this visit?" continued he. "Nay, I know not. Some evidence required from us, perhaps." "May it not be about that cursed affair?" asked Aramis, "in which case I do not greatly care to go, for it would be to pocket a lecture, and since it is my function to give them to others, I am rather averse to receiving them myself." "If it were so," answered Athos, "we should not be taken there by Lord de Winter, for he would come in for his share. He was one of us." "You're right. Yes, let us go." On arriving at the Louvre, Lord de Winter entered first. Indeed, there was but one porter there to receive him at the gate. It was impossible in daylight, for the impoverished state of the habitation grudging charity had conceded to an unfortunate queen to pass unnoticed by Athos, Aramis, and even the Englishman. Large rooms, completely stripped of furniture, bare walls upon which here and there shone the old gold mouldings which had resisted time and neglect, windows with broken panes, impossible to close. No carpets, neither guards nor servants. This is what first met the eyes of Athos, to which he, touching his companion's elbow, directed his attention by his glances. "Mazarin is better lodged," said Aramis. "Mazarin is almost king," answered Athos. "Madame Henrietta is almost no longer queen." If you would condescend to be clever, Athos, observed Aramis, I really do think you would be wittier than poor Monsieur de Voiture. Athos smiled. The queen appeared to be impatiently expecting them, for at the first slight noise she heard in the hall leading to her room, she came herself to the door to receive these courtiers in the corridors of misfortune. Enter. You are welcome, gentlemen, she said. The gentlemen entered and remained standing, but at a motion from the queen they seated themselves. Athos was calm and grave, but Aramis was furious. The sight of such royal misery exasperated him, and his eyes examined every new trace of poverty that presented itself. You are examining the luxury I enjoy, said the queen, glancing sadly around her. Madam, replied Aramis, I must ask your pardon, but I know not how to hide my indignation at seeing how a daughter of Henry IV is treated at the court of France. Monsieur Aramis is not an officer? Asked the queen of Lord de Winter. That gentleman is the Abbé de Herblay, replied he. Aramis blushed. Madam, he said, I am an abbé, it is true, but I am so against my will. I never had a vocation for bands. My cassock is fastened by one button only, and I am always ready to become a musketeer once more. This morning, being ignorant that I should have the honor of seeing your majesty, I encumber myself with this dress, but you will find me none the less a man devoted to your majesty's service, in whatever way you may see fit to use me. The Abbé de Herblay, resumed de Winter, is one of those gallant musketeers formerly belonging to His Majesty King Louis XIII, of whom I have spoken to you, madam. Then turning to Athos, he continued, and this gentleman is that noble Count de la Fère, whose high reputation is so well known to your majesty. Gentlemen, said the queen, a few years ago I had around me ushers, treasurers, armies, and by the lifting of a finger all these were busied in my service. Today, look around you, and it may astonish you that in order to accomplish a plan which is dearer to me than life, I have only Lord de Winter, the friend of 20 years, and you, gentlemen, whom I see for the first time and whom I know, but as my countrymen. It is enough, said Athos, bowing low, if the lives of 3 men can purchase yours, madam. I thank you, gentlemen. But hear me, continued she. I am not only the most miserable of queens, but the most unhappy of mothers, the most wretched of wives. My children, 2 of them at least, the Duke of York and the Princess Elizabeth, are far away from me, exposed to blows of the ambitious, and our foes, my husband the king, is leading in England so wretched an existence that it is no exaggeration to aver that he seeks death as a thing to be desired. Hold, gentlemen, here is the letter conveyed to me by Lord de Winter. Read it. Obeying the queen, Athos read aloud the letter which we have already seen, in which King Charles demanded to know whether the hospitality of France would be accorded him. Well, asked Athos, when it closed the letter. Well, said the queen, it has been refused. The 2 friends exchanged a smile of contempt. And now, said Athos, what is to be done? I have the honor to inquire from your majesty what you desire Monsieur de Herblay and myself to do in your service. We are ready. Ah, sir, you have a noble heart, exclaimed the queen, with a burst of gratitude, whilst Lord de Winter turned to her with a glance which said, Did I not answer for them? But you, sir, said the queen to Aramis. Ay, madam, replied he, follow Monsieur de la Fère wherever he leads, even were it on to death, without demanding wherefore, but when it concerns your majesty's service. Then, added he, looking at the queen with all the grace of former days, I precede the count. Well, then, gentlemen, said the queen, since it is thus, and since you are willing to devote yourselves to the service of a poor princess whom the whole world has abandoned, this is what is required be done for me. The king is alone with a few gentlemen, whom he fears to lose every day, surrounded by the Scotch, whom he distrusts, although he be himself a Scotchman. Since Lord de Winter left him, I am distracted. Sirs, I ask much, too much, perhaps, for I have no title to request it. Go to England, join the king, be his friends, protectors, march to battle at his side, and be near him in his house, where conspiracies, more dangerous than the perils of war, are hatching every day. And in exchange for the sacrifice that you make, gentlemen, I promise not to reward you. I believe that word would offend you, but to love you as a sister, to prefer you, next to my husband and my children, to every one. I swear it before heaven." And the queen raised her eyes solemnly upward. "Madam," said Athos, "when must we set out?" "You consent, then?" exclaimed the queen, joyfully. "Yes, madam. Only it seems to me that your majesty goes too far in engaging to load us with a friendship so far above our merit. We render service to God, madam, in serving a prince so unfortunate, a queen so virtuous. Madam, we are yours, body and soul." "Oh, sirs," said the queen, moved even to tears, "this is the first time for 5 years I have felt the least approach to joy or hope. God, who can read my heart, all the gratitude I feel, will reward you. Save my husband, save the king, and although you care not for the price that is placed upon a good action in this world, leave me the hope that we shall meet again, when I may be able to thank you myself. In the meantime, I remain here. Have you anything to ask of me? From this moment I become your friend, and since you are engaged in my affairs, I ought to occupy myself in yours." "Madam," replied Athos, "I have only to ask your majesty's prayers." "And I," said Aramis, "I am alone in the world and have only your majesty to serve." The queen held out her hand, which they kissed, and she said in a low tone to De Winter, "If you need money, my lord, separate the jewels I have given you. Detach the diamonds and sell them to some Jew. You will receive for them 50 or 60,000 francs. Spend them if necessary, but let these gentlemen be treated as they deserve, that is to say, like kings." The queen had 2 letters ready, one written by herself, the other by her daughter, the Princess Henrietta. Both were addressed to King Charles. She gave the first to Athos and the other to Aramis, so that should they be separated by chance, they might make themselves known to the king, after which they withdrew. At the foot of the staircase, De Winter stopped. "Not to arouse suspicion, gentlemen," said he, "go your way and I will go mine, and this evening at 9 o'clock we will assemble again at the gate St. Denis. We will travel on horseback as far as our horses can go, and afterward we can take the post. Once more, let me thank you, my good friends, both in my own name and the queen's." The 3 gentlemen then shook hands, Lord de Winter taking the Rue St. Honoré, and Athos and Aramis remaining together. "Well," said Aramis when they were alone, "what do you think of this business, my dear Count?" "Bad," replied Athos, "very bad. But you received it with enthusiasm, as I shall ever receive the defense of a great principle, my dear D'Herblay. Monarchs are only strong by the assistance of the aristocracy, but aristocracy cannot survive without the countenance of monarchs. Let us, then, support monarchy in order to support ourselves." "We shall be murdered there," said Aramis. "I hate the English. They are coarse, like every nation that swills beer." "Would it be better to remain here," said Athos, "and take a turn in the Bastille or the dungeon of Vincennes for having favored the escape of Monsieur de Beaufort? Faith, Aramis, believe me, there is little left to regret. We avoid imprisonment, and we play the part of heroes. The choice is easy. It is true, but in everything, friend, one must always return to the same question. A stupid one, I admit, but very necessary. Have you any money?" "Something like 100 pistoles, that my farmer sent to me the day before I left Bragelonne. But out of that sum I ought to leave 50 for Raoul. A young man must live respectably. I have then about 50 pistoles. And you? As for me, I am quite sure that after turning out all my pockets and emptying my drawers, I shall not find 10 louis at home. Fortunately, Lord de Winter is rich. Lord de Winter is ruined for the moment. Oliver Cromwell has annexed his income resources. Now is the time when Baron Porthos would be useful. Now it is that I regret D'Artagnan. Let us entice them away. This secret, Aramis, does not belong to us. Take my advice, then, and let no one into our confidence. And moreover, in taking such a step, we should appear to be doubtful of ourselves. Let us regret their absence to ourselves for our own sakes, but not speak of it. You are right. But what are you going to do until this evening? I have 2 things to postpone. And what are they? First, a thrust with the coadjutor, whom I met last night at Madame de Rambouillet's, and whom I found particular in his remarks respecting me. Oh, fie! A quarrel between priests, a duel between allies. What can I do, friend? He is a bully, and so am I. His cassock is a burden to him, and I imagine I have had enough of mine. In fact, there is so much resemblance between us that I sometimes believe he is Aramis and I am the coadjutor. This kind of life fatigues and oppresses me. Besides, he is a turbulent fellow who will ruin our party. I am convinced that if I gave him a box on the ear, such as I gave this morning to the little citizen who splashed me, it would change the appearance of things. And I, my dear Aramis, quietly replied Athos, I think it would only change Monsieur de Retz's appearance. Take my advice, leave things just as they are. Besides, you are neither of you now your own masters. He belongs to Fronde, and you to the Queen of England. So, if the second matter which you regret being unable to attend to is not more important than the first, oh, that is of the first importance. Attend to it, then, at once. Unfortunately, it is a thing that I can't perform at any time I choose. It was arranged for the evening, and no other time will serve. I understand, said Athos, smiling, midnight. About that time. But, my dear fellow, those are things that bear postponement, and you must put off, especially with so good an excuse to give on your return. Yes, if I return. If you do not return, how does it concern you? Be reasonable. Come, you are no longer 20 years old. To my great regret, mordieu, if I were but 20 years old. Yes, said Athos, doubtless you commit great follies, but now we must part. I have 1 or 2 visits to make, and a letter yet to write. Call for me at 8 o'clock, or shall I wait supper for you at 7? That will do very well, said Aramis. I have 20 visits to make and as many letters to write. They then separated. Athos went to pay a visit to Madame de Vendôme, left his name at Madame de Chevreuse, and wrote the following letter: D'Artagnan. Dear friend, I am about to set off with Aramis on important business. I wish to make my adieus to you, but time does not permit. Remember that I write to you now to repeat how much affection for you I still cherish. Raoul is gone to Blois and is ignorant of my departure. Watch over him in my absence as much as you possibly can. And if by chance you receive no news of me 3 months hence, tell him to open a packet, which you will find addressed in my bronze casket at Blois, of which I send you now the key. Embrace Porthos from Aramis and myself. Adieu, perhaps farewell. At the hour agreed upon, Aramis arrived. He was dressed as an officer and had the old sword at his side, which he had drawn so often, and which he was more than ever ready to draw. By the by, he said, I think that we are decidedly wrong to depart thus, without leaving a line for Porthos and D'Artagnan. The thing is done, dear friend, said Athos. I foresaw then have embraced them both from you and myself. You are a wonderful man, my dear Count, said Aramis. You think of everything. Well, have you made up your mind to this journey? Quite. And now that I reflect about it, I am glad to leave Paris at this moment. And so am I, replied Athos. My only regret is not having seen D'Artagnan, but the rascal is so cunning, he might have guessed our project. When supper was over, Blaisois entered. Sir, said he, here is Monsieur d'Artagnan's answer. But I did not tell you there would be an answer, stupid, said Athos. And I set off without waiting for one, but he called me back and gave me this. And he presented a little leather bag, plump and giving out a golden jingle. Athos opened it and began by drawing forth a little note, written in these terms. My dear Count, when one travels, and especially for 3 months, one never has a superfluity of money. Now, recalling former times of mutual distress, I send you half my purse. It is money to obtain which I made Mazarin sweat. Don't make a bad use of it. I entreat you. As to what you say about not seeing you again, I believe not a word of it. With such a heart as yours and such a sword, one passes to the valley of the shadow of death 12 times, and scathed and unalarmed. Au revoir, not farewell. It is unnecessary to say that from the day I saw Raoul I loved him. Nevertheless, believe that I heartily pray that I may not become to him a father, however much I might be proud of such a son. Your D'Artagnan. P.S. Be it well understood that the 50 louis which I send are equally for Aramis as for you as Aramis. Athos smiled, and his fine eye was dimmed by a tear. D'Artagnan, who had loved him so tenderly, loved him still, although a Mazarinist. There are the 50 louis, I faith, said Aramis, emptying the purse on the table, all bearing the effigy of Louis XIII. Well, what shall you do with this money, Count? Shall you keep it or send it back? I shall keep it, Aramis, and even though I had no need of it, I still should keep it. What is offered from a generous heart should be accepted generously. Take 25 of them, Aramis, and give me the remaining 25. All right. I am glad to see you are of my opinion. There now, shall we start? When you like, but have you no groom? No. That idiot Bazin had the folly to make himself verger, as you know, and therefore cannot leave Notre Dame. Very well. Take Blaisois, with whom I know not what to do, since I already have Grimaud. Willingly, said Aramis. At this moment Grimaud appeared at the door. Ready, said he, with his usual curtness. Let us go, then, said Athos. The two friends mounted, as did their servants. At the corner of the quay they encountered Bazin, who was running breathlessly. "Oh, sir," exclaimed he, "thank heaven I have arrived in time. Monsieur Porthos has just been to your house, and has left this for you, saying that the letter was important and must be given to you before you left." "Good," said Aramis, taking a purse which Bazin presented to him. "What is this?" "Wait, your reverence, there's a letter. You know, I have already told you that if you ever call me anything but Chevalier, I will break every bone in your body. Give me the letter." "How can you read?" asked Athos. "It is as dark as a cold oven." "Wait," said Bazin, striking a flint and setting afire a twisted waxlight, with which he started the church candles. Thus illumined, Aramis read the following epistle. "My dear D'Herblay, I learn from D'Artagnan, who has embraced me on the part of the Comte de la Fere and yourself, that you are setting out on a journey, which may perhaps last 2 or 3 months. As I know that you do not like to ask money of your friends, I offer you some of my own accord. Here are 200 pistoles, which you can dispose of as you wish and return to me when opportunity occurs. Do not fear that you put me to inconvenience. If I want money, I can send for some of any of my chateaux. At Bracieu's alone, I have 20,000 francs in gold. So, if I do not send you more, it is because I fear you would not accept a larger sum. I address you because you know that although I esteem him from my heart, I am a little awed by the Comte de la Fere. But it is understood that what I offer you, I offer him at the same time. I am, as I trust you do not doubt, your devoted, Du Vallon de Bracieux de Pierrefonds." "Well," said Aramis, "what do you say to that?" "I say, my dear D'Herblay, that it is almost sacrilege to distrust Providence when one has such friends, and therefore we will divide the pistoles from Porthos, as we divided the louis sent by D'Artagnan, the division being made by the light of Bazin's taper." The two friends continued their road, and a quarter of an hour later they had joined De Winter at the Port Saint-Denis. Chapter 43, in which it is proved that first impulses are oftentimes the best. The three gentlemen took the road to Picardy, a road so well known to them, and which recalled to Athos and Aramis some of the most picturesque adventures of their youth. "If Musketeer were with us," observed Athos, on reaching the spot where they had had a dispute with the paviours, "how he would tremble at passing this. Do you remember, Aramis, that it was here he received that famous bullet wound?" "By my faith, 'twould be excusable in him to tremble," replied Aramis, "for even I feel a shudder at the recollection. Hold, just above that tree is a little spot where I thought I was killed." It was soon time for Grimaud to recall the past. Arriving before the inn at which his master and himself had made such an enormous repast, he approached Athos and said, showing him the air hole of the cellar, "Sausages." Athos began to laugh, for this juvenile escapade has appeared to be as amusing as if someone had related it of another person. At last, after traveling 2 days and a night, they arrived at Boulogne toward the evening, favored by magnificent weather. Boulogne was a strong position, then almost a deserted town, built entirely on the heights. What is now called the lower town did not then exist. "Gentlemen," said De Winter, on reaching the gate of the town, "let us do here as at Paris. Let us separate to avoid suspicion. I know an inn little frequented, but at which the host is entirely devoted to me. I will go there, where I expect to find letters, and you go to the first tavern in the town, to Leapy du Grand Henri, for instance, refresh yourselves, and in 2 hours be upon the jetty. Our boat is waiting for us there." The matter being thus decided, the two friends found, about 200 paces further, the tavern indicated. Their horses were fed, but not unsaddled. The groom supped, for it was already late, and their two masters, impatient to return, appointed a place of meeting with them on the jetty, and desired them on no account to exchange a word with any one. It is needless to say that this caution concerned Blaisois alone, long enough since it had been a useless one to Grimaud. Athos and Aramis walked down toward the port. From their dress, covered with dust, and from a certain easy manner by means of which a man accustomed to travel is always recognizable, the two friends excited the attention of a few promenaders. There was more especially one upon whom their arrival had produced a decided impression. This man, whom they had noticed from the first for the same reason they had themselves been remarked by others, was walking in a listless way up and down the jetty. From the moment he perceived them, he did not cease to look at them, and seemed to burn with the wish to speak to them. On reaching the jetty, Athos and Aramis stopped to look at a little boat made fast to a pile and ready rigged, as if waiting to start. "That is doubtless our boat," said Athos. "Yes," replied Aramis, "and the sloop out there making ready to sail must be that which is to take us to our destination. Now," continued he, "if only the winter does not keep us waiting. It is not at all amusing here. There is not a single woman passing." "Hush!" said Athos. "We are overheard." In truth, the walker, who, during the observations of the two friends, had passed and repassed behind them several times, stopped at the name of De Winter, but as his face betrayed no emotion at mention of this name, it might have been by chance he stood so still. "Gentlemen," said the man, who was young and pale, bowing with ease and courtesy, "pardon my curiosity, but I see you come from Paris, or at least that you are strangers at Boulogne." "We come from Paris, yes," replied Athos, with the same courtesy. "What is there we can do for you?" "Sir," said the young man, "will you be so good as to tell me if it be true that Cardinal Mazarin is no longer minister?" "That is a strange question," said Aramis. "He is and he is not," replied Athos. "That is to say, he is dismissed by one half of France, but by intrigues and promises he makes the other half sustain him. You will perceive that this may last a long time." "However, sir," said the stranger, "he has neither fled nor is in prison?" "No, sir, not at this moment at least." "Sirs, accept my thanks for your politeness," said the young man, retreating. "What do you think of that interrogator?" asked Aramis. "I think he is either a dull provincial person or a spy in search of information." "And you replied to him with that notion?" "Nothing warranted me to answer him otherwise. He was polite to me, and I was so to him. But if he be a spy, what do you think a spy would be about here? We are not living in the time of Cardinal Richelieu, who have closed the ports on bare suspicion." "It matters not. You were wrong to reply to him as you did," continued Aramis, following with his eyes the young man, now vanishing behind the cliffs. "And you," said Athos, "you forget that you committed a very different kind of imprudence in pronouncing Lord de Winter's name. Did you not see that at that name the young man stopped? More reason, then, when he spoke to you, for sending him about his business." "A quarrel?" asked Athos. "And since when have you become afraid of a quarrel?" "I am always afraid of a quarrel when I am expected at any place, and when such a quarrel might possibly prevent my reaching it. Besides, let me own something to you. I am anxious to see that young man nearer. And wherefore? Aramis, you will certainly laugh at me. You will say that I am always repeating the same thing. You will call me the most timorous of visionaries. But to whom do you see resemblance in that young man? In beauty or on the contrary?" asked Aramis, laughing. "In ugliness, in so far as a man can resemble a woman." "Ah, egad!" cried Aramis. "You set me thinking. No, in truth you are no visionary, my dear friend, and now I think of it. Yes, faith, you're right. Those delicate yet firm-set lips, those eyes which seem always at the command of the intellect and never the heart. Yes, it is one of Milady's bastards." "You laugh, Aramis." "From habit, that is all. I swear to you, I like no better than yourself to meet that viper in my path." "Ah, here is De Winter coming," said Athos. "Good. One thing now is only a warning, and that is that our groom should not keep us waiting." "No," said Athos. "I see them about 20 paces behind my lord. I recognize Grimaud by his long legs and his determined slouch. Tony carries our muskets." "Then we set sail tonight?" asked Aramis, glancing toward the west, where the sun had left a single golden cloud, which, dipping into the ocean, appeared by degrees to be extinguished. "Probably," said Athos. "Diable," resumed Aramis, "I have little fancy for sea by day, still less at night. The sounds of wind and wave, the frightful movements of the vessel. I confess I prefer the convent of noisy." Athos smiled sadly, for it was evident that he was thinking of other things as he listened to his friend, and moved toward De Winter. "What ails our friend?" said Aramis. "He resembles one of Dante's damned, whose neck Apollyon has dislocated, and who are ever looking at their heels. What the devil makes him glower thus behind him?" When De Winter perceived them, in his turn he advanced toward them with surprising rapidity. "What is the matter, my lord?" said Athos, "and what puts you out of breath thus?" "Nothing," replied De Winter. "Nothing, and yet in passing the heights it seemed to me," and he again turned round. Athos glanced at Aramis. "But let us go," continued De Winter. "Let us be off. The boat must be waiting for us, and there is our sloop at anchor. Do you see it there? I wish I were on board already." And he looked back again. "He has seen him," said Athos in a low tone to Aramis. They had reached the ladder which led to the boat. De Winter made the grooms who carried the arms and the porters with the luggage descend first, and was about to follow them. At this moment Athos perceived a man walking on the seashore parallel to the jetty, and hastening his steps, as if to reach the other side of the port, scarcely 20 steps from the place of embarking. He fancied in the darkness that he recognized the young man who had questioned him. Athos now descended the ladder in his turn, without losing sight of the young man. The latter, to make a short cut, had appeared on a sluice. "He certainly bodes us no good," said Athos, "but let us embark. Once out at sea, let him come." And Athos sprang into the boat, which was immediately pushed off, and which soon sped seawards under the efforts of 4 stalwart rowers. But the young man had begun to follow, or rather to advance before the boat. She was obliged to pass between the point of the jetty, surmounted by a beacon just lighted, and a rock which jutted out. They saw him in the distance climbing the rock in order to look down upon the boat as it passed. "Aye, but," said Aramis, "that young fellow is decidedly a spy." "Which is a young man?" asked De Winter, turning around. "He who followed us and spoke to us awaits us there. Behold." De Winter turned and followed the direction of Aramis's finger. The beacon bathed with light the little strait through which they were about to pass in the rock, where the young man stood with bare head and crossed arms. "It is he!" exclaimed De Winter, seizing the arm of Athos. "It is he! I thought I recognized him, and I was not mistaken." "Whom do you mean?" asked Aramis. "Milady's son," replied Athos. "The monk!" exclaimed Grimaud. The young man heard these words and bent so forward over the rock that one might have supposed he was about to precipitate himself from it. "Yes, it is I, my uncle, I, the son of Milady, I, the monk, I, the secretary in front of Cromwell. I know you now, both you and your companions." In that boat sat 3 men, unquestionably brave, whose courage no man would have dared dispute. Nevertheless, at that voice, that accent, and those gestures, they felt a chill access of terror cramp their veins. As for Grimaud, his hair stood on end and drops of sweat ran down his brow. "Ah!" exclaimed Aramis, "that is a nephew, the monk, and the son of Milady, as he says himself." "Alas, yes," murmured De Winter. "Then wait," said Aramis, and with the terrible coolness which on important occasions he showed, he took one of the muskets from Tony, shouldered and aimed it at the young man, who stood, like the accusing angel, upon the rock. "Fire!" cried Grimaud unconsciously. Athos threw himself on the muzzle of the gun and arrested the shot which was about to be fired. "The devil take you!" said Aramis. "I had him so well at the point of my gun I should have sent a ball into his breast." "It is enough to have killed the mother," said Athos hoarsely. "The mother was a wretch who struck at us all and at those dear to us." "Yes, but the son has done us no harm." Grimaud, who had risen to watch the effect of the shot, fell back hopeless, wringing his hands. The young man burst into a laugh. "Ah, it is certainly you," he cried. "I know you even better now." His mocking laugh and threatening words passed over their heads, carried by the breeze, until lost in the depths of the horizon. Aramis shuddered. "Be calm," exclaimed Athos. "For heaven's sake, how we cease to be men." "No," said Aramis, "but that fellow is a fiend, and asked the uncle whether I was wrong to rid him of his dear nephew." De Winter only replied by a groan. "It was all up with him," continued Aramis. I much fear that with all your wisdom such mercy yet will prove supernal folly." Athos took Lord de Winter's hand and tried to turn the conversation. "When shall we land in England?" he asked. But de Winter seemed not to hear his words and made no reply. "Hold, Athos," said Aramis. "Perhaps there is yet time. See if he is still in the same place." Athos turned around with an effort. The sight of the young man was evidently painful to him, and there he still was, in fact, on the rock, the beacon shedding around him, as it were, a doubtful aureole. "Decidedly, Aramis," said Athos, "I think I was wrong not to let you fire." "Hold your tongue," replied Aramis. "You would make me weep if such a thing were possible." At this moment they were hailed by a voice from the sloop, and a few seconds later men, servants, and baggage were aboard. The captain was only waiting for his passengers. Hardly had they put foot on deck ere her head was turned towards Hastings, where they were to disembark. At this instant the three friends turned, in spite of themselves, a last look on the rock, upon the menacing figure which pursued them and now stood out with distinctness still. Then a voice reached them once more, sending this threat: "To our next meeting, sirs, in England." Chapter 44. Te Deum for the victory of Lens. The bustle which had been observed by Henrietta Maria, and for which she had vainly sought to discover a reason, was occasioned by the battle of Lens, announced by the prince's messenger, the Duc de Chatillon, who had taken such a noble part in the engagement. He was, besides, charged to hang 25 flags, taken from the Lorraine party, as well as from the Spaniards, upon the arches of Notre Dame. Such news was decisive. It destroyed, in favor of the court, the struggle commenced with Parliament. The motive given for all the taxes summarily imposed, and to which the Parliament had made opposition, was the necessity of sustaining the honor of France and the uncertain hope of beating the enemy. Now, since the affair of Nordlingen, they had experienced nothing but reverses. The Parliament had a plea for calling Mazarin to account for imaginary victories, always promised, ever deferred. But this time there really had been fighting, a triumph and a complete one. And this all knew so well that it was a double victory for the court, a victory at home and abroad. So that even when the young king learned the news, he exclaimed, "Ah, gentlemen of the Parliament, we shall see what you will say now." Upon which the queen had pressed a royal child to her heart, whose haughty and unruly sentiments were in such harmony with her own. A council was called on the same evening, but nothing transpired or would have been decided on. It was only known that on the following Sunday a Te Deum would be sung at Notre Dame in honor of the victory of Lens. The following Sunday, then, the Parisians arose with joy. At that period a Te Deum was a grand affair. This kind of ceremony had not then been abused, and it produced a great effect. The shops were deserted, houses closed. Everyone wished to see the young king with his mother, and the famous Cardinal Mazarin, whom they hated so much that no one wished to be deprived of his presence. Moreover, great liberty prevailed throughout the immense crowd. Every opinion was openly expressed in chorus, so to speak, of coming insurrection, as 1,000 bells of all the parish churches rang out the Te Deum, the police belonging to the city being formed by the city itself. Nothing threatening presented itself to disturb this concert of universal hatred or freeze the frequent scoffs of slanderous lips. Nevertheless, at 8 o'clock in the morning the regiment of the Queen's Guards, commanded by Guitant, under whom was his nephew Comminges, marched publicly, preceded by drums and trumpets, filing off in the Palais Royal as far as Notre Dame, a maneuver which the Parisians witnessed tranquilly, delighted as they were with military music and brilliant uniforms. Friquet had put on his Sunday clothes, under the pretext of having a swollen face, which he had managed to simulate by introducing a handful of cherry kernels into one side of his mouth, and had procured a whole holiday from Bazin. On leaving Bazin, Friquet started off to the Palais Royal, where he arrived at the moment of the turning out of the regiment of guards, and as he had only gone there for the enjoyment of seeing it and hearing the music, he took his place at their head, beating the drum on 2 pieces of slate and passing from that exercise to that of the trumpet, which he counterfeited quite naturally with his mouth in a manner which had more than once called forth the praises of amateurs of imitative harmony. This amusement lasted from the Barriere des Surgeons to the place of Notre Dame, and Friquet found in it very real enjoyment. But when at last the regiment separated, penetrated the heart of the city, and placed itself at the extremity of the Rue Saint-Christophe, near the Rue Cocatrix, in which Broussel lived, then Friquet remembered that he had not had breakfast, and after thinking in which direction he had better turn his steps in order to accomplish this important act of the day, he reflected deeply and decided that Councillor Broussel should bear the cost of this repast. In consequence, he took to his heels, arrived breathlessly at the councillor's door, and knocked violently. His mother, the councillor's old servant, opened it. "What doest thou here? Good for nothing," she said. "And why art thou not at Notre Dame?" "I have been there, mother," said Friquet, "but I saw things happen of which Master Broussel ought to be warned, and so with Monsieur Bazin's permission, you know, mother, Monsieur Bazin the verger, I came to speak to Monsieur Broussel." "And what hast thou to say, boy, to Monsieur Broussel?" "I wish to tell him," replied Friquet, screaming with all his might, "that there's a whole regiment of guards coming this way, and as I hear everywhere that at the court they're ill-disposed to him, I wish to warn him that he may be on his guard." Broussel heard the scream of a young oddity, and, enchanted with this excessive zeal, came down to the first floor, for he was, in truth, working in his room on the second. "Well," said he, "friend, what matters a regiment of guards to us, and art thou not mad to make such a disturbance? Knowest thou not that it is a custom of these soldiers to act thus, and that it is usual for the regiment to form themselves into 2 solid walls when the king goes by?" Friquet counterfeited surprise, and twisting his new cap around in his fingers, said, "It is not astonishing for you to know it, Monsieur Broussel, who knows everything. But as for me, by holy truth, I did not know it, and I thought I would give you good advice. You must not be angry with me for that, Monsieur Broussel. On the contrary, my boy, on the contrary, I am pleased with your zeal. Dame Nanette, look for those apricots which Madame de Longueuil sent to us yesterday from Noisy, and give 6 of them to your son, with a crust of new bread." "Oh, thank you, sir, thank you, Monsieur Broussel," said Friquet. "I am so fond of apricots." Broussel then proceeded to his wife's room, and asked for breakfast. It was 9 o'clock. The councillor placed himself at the window. The street was completely deserted, but in the distance was heard, like the noise of the tide rushing in, the deep hum of the populous waves increasing now around Notre Dame. This noise redoubled when D'Artagnan, with a company of Musketeers, placed himself at the gates of Notre Dame to secure the service of the church. He had instructed Porthos to profit by this opportunity to see the ceremony, and Porthos, in full dress, mounted his finest horse, taking the part of supernumerary musketeer, as D'Artagnan had so often done formerly. The sergeant of this company, a veteran of the Spanish wars, had recognized Porthos, his old companion, and very soon all those who served under him were placed in possession of startling facts concerning the honor of the ancient Musketeers of Treville. Porthos had not only been well received by the company, but he was moreover looked on with great admiration. At 10 o'clock the guns of the Louvre announced the departure of the king, and then a movement, similar to that of trees in a stormy wind that bend and ride with agitated tops, ran through the multitude, which was compressed behind the immovable muskets of the guard. At last the king appeared with the queen in a gilded chariot. 10 other carriages followed, containing the ladies of honor, the officers of the royal household, and the court. "God save the king!" was the cry in every direction. The young monarch gravely put his head out of the window, looked sufficiently grateful, and even bowed, at which the cries of the multitude were renewed. Just as the court was settling down in the cathedral, a carriage, bearing the arms of Comminges, quitted the line of the court carriages and proceeded slowly to the end of the Rue Saint-Christophe, now entirely deserted. When it arrived there, for guards and police officer who accompanied it mounted into the heavy machine and closed the shutters. Then, through an opening cautiously made, the policeman began to watch the length of the Rue Cocatrix, as if he was waiting for someone. All the world was occupied with the ceremony, so that neither the chariot nor the precautions taken by those who were within it had been observed. Friquet, whose eye, ever on the alert, could alone have discovered them, had gone to devour his apricots upon the entablature of a house in the square of Notre Dame. Thence he saw the king, the queen, and Monsieur Mazarin, and heard the mass as well as if he had been on duty. Toward the end of service, the queen, seeing Comminges standing near her, waiting for a confirmation of the order she had given him before quitting the Louvre, said in a whisper, "Go, Comminges, and may God aid you." Comminges immediately left the church and entered the Rue Saint-Christophe. Friquet, seeing this fine officer thus walk away, followed by 2 guards, amused himself by pursuing them, and did this so much the more gladly as the ceremony ended at that instant and the king remounted his carriage. Hardly had the police officer observed Comminges at the end of the Rue Cocatrix when he said one word to the coachman, who at once put his vehicle into motion and drove up before Broussel's door. Comminges knocked at the door at the same moment, and Friquet was waiting behind Comminges until the door should be opened. "What dost thou there, rascal?" asked Comminges. "I want to go into Master Broussel's house, captain," replied Friquet, in that wheedling way the gamin of Paris knows so well how to assume when necessary. "And on what floor does he live?" asked Comminges. "In the whole house," said Friquet. "The house belongs to him. He occupies the 2nd floor when he works, and descends to the 1st to take his meals. He must be at dinner now. It is noon." "Good," said Comminges. At this moment the door was opened, and having questioned the servant, the officer learned that Master Broussel was at home and at dinner. Broussel was seated at the table with his family, having his wife opposite to him, his 2 daughters by his side, and his son, Louviers, whom we have already seen when the accident happened to Counselor, an accident from which he had quite recovered. At the bottom of the table, the worthy man, restored to perfect health, was tasting the fine fruit which Madame de Longueville had sent to him. At sight of the officer, Broussel was somewhat moved, but seeing him bow politely, he rose and bowed also. Still, in spite of this reciprocal politeness, the countenances of the women betrayed a certain amount of uneasiness. Louviers became very pale and waited impatiently for the officer to explain himself. "Sir," said Comminges, "I am the bearer of an order from the king." "Very well, sir," replied Broussel. "What is this order?" And he held out his hand. "I am commissioned to seize your person, sir," said Comminges, in the same tone and with the same politeness. "And if you will believe me, you had better spare yourself the trouble of reading that long letter and follow me." A thunderbolt falling in the midst of these good people, so peacefully assembled there, would not have produced a more appalling effect. It was a horrible thing at that period to be imprisoned by the enmity of the king. Louviers sprang forward to snatch his sword, which stood against a chair in a corner of the room. But a glance from the worthy Broussel, who in the midst of it all did not lose his presence of mind, checked this foolhardy action of despair. Madame Broussel, separated by the width of the table from her husband, burst into tears, and the young girls clung to their father's arms. "Come, sir," said Comminges, "make haste. You must obey the king." "Sir," said Broussel, "I am in bad health and cannot give myself up a prisoner in this state. I must have time." "It is impossible," said Comminges. "The order is strict and must be put into execution this instant." "Impossible," said Louviers. "Sir, beware of driving us to despair." "Impossible," cried a shrill voice from the end of the room. Comminges turned and saw Dame Nanette, her eyes flashing with anger and a broom in her hand. "My good Nanette, be quiet, I beseech you," said Broussel. "Me, keep quiet while my master is being arrested. He, the support, the liberator, the father of the people. Ah, well, yes, you have to know me yet. Are you going?" added she to Comminges. The latter smiled. "Come, sir," said he, addressing Broussel. "Silence that woman and follow me." "Silence me." Me, said Nanette. "Ah, yet one wants someone beside you for that. My fine king's cockatoo. You shall see." And Dame Nanette sprang to a window, threw it open, and in such a piercing voice that it might have been heard in the square of Notre Dame. "Help!" she screamed. "My master is being arrested. The Councillor Broussel is being arrested. Help!" "Sir," said Comminges, "declare yourself at once. Will you obey, or do you intend to rebel against king?" I obey, sir," cried Browsel, trying to disengage himself from the grasp of his two daughters, and by a look restrain his son, who seemed determined to dispute authority. "In that case," commanded Comminges, "silence that old woman." "Ah, old woman!" screamed Nanette, and she began to shriek more loudly, clinging to the bars of the window. "Help! Help! For Master Browsel, who is arrested because he has defended the people. Help!" Comminges seized the servant around the waist and would have dragged her from her post, but at that instant a treble voice, proceeding from a kind of entresol, was heard screeching, "Murder! Fire! Assassins! Master Browsel is being killed! Master Browsel is being strangled!" It was Friquette's voice, and Dame Nanette, feeling herself supported, recommenced with all her strength to sound her shrilly squawk. Many curious faces had already appeared at the windows, and the people attracted in the street began to run. First men, then groups, and then a crowd of people. Hearing cries and seeing a chariot, they could not understand it. But Friquette sprang from the entresol onto the top of the carriage. "They want to arrest Master Browsel," he cried. "The guards are in the carriage, and the officer is upstairs." The crowd began to murmur and approached the house. The two guards who had remained in the lane mounted to the aid of Comminges. Those who were in the chariot opened the doors and presented arms. "Don't you see them?" cried Friquette. "Don't you see? There they are." The coachman, turning around, gave Friquette a slash with his whip, which made him scream with pain. "Ah, devil's coachman!" cried Friquette. "You're meddling too. Wait!" And regaining his entresol, he overwhelmed the coachman with every projectile he could lay hands on. The tumult now began to increase. The street was not able to contain the spectators who assembled from every direction. The crowd invaded the space which the dreaded pikes of the guards had till then kept clear between them and the carriage. The soldiers, pushed back by these living walls, were in danger of being crushed against the spokes of the wheels and the panels of the carriages. The cries which the police officer repeated 20 times, "In the king's name," were powerless against this formidable multitude, seemed, on the contrary, to exasperate it still more, when at the shout, "In the name of the king," an officer ran up, and seeing the uniforms ill-treated, he sprang into the scuffle sword in hand, and brought unexpected help to the guards. This gentleman was a young man, scarcely 16 years of age, now white with anger. He leaped from his charger, placed his back against the shaft of the carriage, making a rampart his horse, drew his pistols from their holsters and fastened them to his belt, and began to fight with a back sword, like a man accustomed to the handling of his weapon. During 10 minutes he alone kept the crowd at bay. At last Comminges appeared, pushing Browsel before him. "Let us break the carriage," cried the people. "In the king's name," cried Comminges. "The first who advances is a dead man," cried Raoul, for it was in fact he, who, feeling himself pressed and almost crushed by a gigantic citizen, pricked him with the point of his sword and sent him howling back. Comminges, so to speak, threw Browsel into the carriage and sprang in after him. At this moment a shot was fired, and a ball passed through the hat of Comminges and broke the arm of one of the guards. Comminges looked up and saw amidst the smoke the threatening face of Louvieres appearing at the window of the second floor. "Very well, sir," said Comminges. "You shall hear this anon." "And you of me, sir," said Louvieres, "and we shall see then who can speak the loudest." Friquette and Nanette continued to shout. The cries, the noise of the shot, and the intoxicating smell of powder produced their usual maddening effects. "Down with the officer! Down with him!" was the cry. "One step nearer," said Comminges, putting down the sashes, that the interior of the carriage might be well seen, and placing his sword on his prisoner's breast. "One step nearer, and I kill the prisoner. My orders were to carry him off alive or dead. I will take him dead, that's all." A terrible cry was heard, and the wife and daughters of Browsel held up their hands in supplication to the people. The latter knew that this officer, who was so pale, but who appeared so determined, would keep his word. They continued to threaten, but they began to disperse. "Drive to the palace," said Comminges to the coachman, who was by then more dead than alive. The man whipped his animals, which cleared away through the crowd, but on arriving on the quay they were obliged to stop. The carriage was upset, the horses carried off, stifled, mangled by the crowd. Raoul on foot, for he had not time to mount his horse again, tired, like the guards, of distributing blows with the flat of his sword, had recourse to its point, but this last and dreaded resource served only to exasperate the multitude. From time to time a shot from a musket or the blade of a rapier flashed among the crowd. Projectiles continued to hail down from the windows, and some shots were heard, the echo of which, though they were probably fired in the air, made all hearts vibrate. Voices, unheard except on days of revolution, were distinguished. Faces were seen that only appeared on days of bloodshed. Cries of death, death to the guards, to the same with the officer, were heard above all the noise, deafening as it was. Raoul, his hat in ribbons, his face bleeding, felt not only his strength, but also his reason going. A red mist covered his sight, and through this mist he saw 100 threatening arms stretched over him, ready to seize upon him when he fell. The guards were unable to help anyone. Each one was occupied with his self-preservation. All was over. Carriages, horses, guards, and perhaps even the prisoner were about to be torn to shreds, when all at once a voice well known to Raoul was heard, and suddenly a great sword glittered in the air. At the same time the crowd opened, upset, trodden down, and an officer of the Musketeers, striking and cutting right and left, rushed up to Raoul and took him in his arms just as he was about to fall. "God's blood!" cried the officer. "Have they killed him? Woe to them if it be so." And he turned around, so stern with anger, strength, and threat, that the most excited rebels hustled back on one another in order to escape, and some of them even rolled into the Seine. "Monsieur d'Artagnan," murmured Raoul. "Yes, Steph, in person, and fortunately it seems for you, my young friend. Come on here, you others," he continued, rising in his stirrups, raising his sword, and addressing those musketeers who had not been able to follow his rapid onslaught. "Come, sweep away all that for me. Shoulder muskets, present arms, aim." At this command the mountain of populace thinned so suddenly that D'Artagnan could not repress a burst of Homeric laughter. "Thank you, D'Artagnan," said Comminges, showing half of his body to the window of the broken vehicle. "Thanks, my young friend, your name, that I may mention to the Queen." Raoul was about to reply when D'Artagnan bent down to his ear. "Hold your tongue," said he, "and let me answer. Do not lose time, Comminges," he continued. "Get out of the carriage if you can and make another draw up. Be quick, or in 5 minutes the mob will be on us again with swords and muskets, and you will be killed. Hold, there's a carriage coming over yonder." Then bending again to Raoul, he whispered, "Above all things do not divulge your name." "That's right. I will go," said Comminges, "and if they come back, fire." "Not at all, not at all," replied D'Artagnan. "Let no one move. On the contrary, one shot at this moment will be paid for dearly tomorrow." Comminges took his 4 guards and as many musketeers and ran to the carriage, from which he made the people inside dismount, and brought them to the vehicle which had upset. But when it was necessary to convey the prisoner from one carriage to the other, the people, catching sight of him whom they called their liberator, uttered every imaginable cry and knotted themselves once more around the vehicle. "Start, start," said D'Artagnan. "There are 10 men to accompany you. I will keep 20 to hold and check the mob. Go, and lose not a moment. 10 men for Monsieur de Comminges." As the carriage started off, the cries were redoubled, and more than 10,000 people thronged the quay and overflowed the Pont Neuf and adjacent streets. A few shots were fired, and 1 musketeer was wounded. "Forward!" cried D'Artagnan, driven to extremities, biting his mustache, and then he charged with his 20 men and dispersed them in fear. 1 man alone remained in his place, gun in hand. "Ah!" he exclaimed, "it is thou who wouldst have him assassinated? Wait an instant." And he pointed his gun at D'Artagnan, who was riding toward him at full speed. D'Artagnan bent down to his horse's neck. The young man fired, and the ball severed the feathers from a hat. The horse started, brushed against the imprudent man, who thought by his strength alone to stay the tempest, and he fell against the wall. D'Artagnan pulled up his horse, and whilst his musketeers continued to charge, he returned and bent with drawn sword over the man he had knocked down. "Oh, sir!" exclaimed Raoul, recognizing the young man as having seen him in the Rue Cocatrix. "Spare him! It is his son." D'Artagnan's arm dropped to his side. "Ah, you are his son," he said. "That is a different thing." "Sir, I surrender," said Louviers, presenting his unloaded musket to the officer. "And no, do not surrender. Egad, on the contrary, be off, and quickly. If I take you, you will be hung." The young man did not wait to be told twice, but passing under the horse's head, disappeared at the corner of the Rue Guénégaud. "I faith," said D'Artagnan to Raoul, "you were just in time to stay my hand. He was a dead man, and on my honor, if I had discovered that it was his son, I should have regretted having killed him." "Ah, sir," said Raoul, "allow me, after thanking you for that poor fellow's life, to thank you on my own account. I, too, sir, was almost dead when you arrived." Wait, young man. Do not fatigue yourself with speaking. We can talk of it afterward." Then, seeing that the Musketeers had cleared the quay from the Pont Neuf to the Quai Saint-Michel, he raised his sword for them to double their speed. The Musketeers trotted up, and at the same time the 10 men whom D'Artagnan had given to Comminges appeared. "Halloo!" cried D'Artagnan. "Has something fresh happened?" "Yes, sir," replied the sergeant. "Their vehicle has broken down a second time. It really must be doomed." "They are bad managers," said D'Artagnan, shrugging his shoulders. "When a carriage is chosen, it ought to be strong. The carriage in which a Broussel is to be arrested ought to be able to bear 10,000 men. What are your commands, Lieutenant?" "Take the detachment and conduct him to his place." "But you will be left alone?" "Certainly. So you suppose I have need of an escort? Go." The Musketeers set off, and D'Artagnan was left alone with Raoul. "Now," he said, "are you in pain?" "Yes. My head is not only swimming, but burning." "What's the matter with his head?" said D'Artagnan, raising the battered hat. Ah, a bruise." "Yes, I think I received a flower pot upon my head." "Brutes," said D'Artagnan. "But were you not on horseback?" "You have spurs." "Yes, but I got down to defend Monsieur de Comminges, and my horse was taken away. Here it is, I see." At this very moment Friquet passed, mounted on Raoul's horse, waving his party-colored cap and crying, "Broussel, Broussel." "Halloo! Stop, rascal!" cried D'Artagnan. "Bring hither that horse." Friquet heard perfectly, but he pretended not to do so and tried to continue his road. D'Artagnan felt inclined for an instant to pursue Master Friquet, but not wishing to leave Raoul alone, he contented himself with taking a pistol from the holster and cocking it. Friquet had a quick eye and a fine ear. He saw D'Artagnan's movement, heard the sound of the click, and stopped at once. "Ah, it is you, your honor," he said, advancing toward D'Artagnan, "and I am truly pleased to meet you." D'Artagnan looked attentively at Friquet, and recognized the little chorister of the Rue de la Calandre. "Ah, 'tis thou, rascal," said he. "Come here. So thou hast changed thy trade. Thou art no longer a choir boy nor a tavern boy. Thou hast become a horse stealer?" "Ah, your honor, how can you say so?" exclaimed Friquet. "I was seeking the gentleman to whom this horse belongs, an officer, brave and handsome as a youthful Caesar." Then, pretending to see Raoul for the first time, "Ah, but if I mistake not," continued he, "here he is. You won't forget the boy, sir." Raoul put his hand in his pocket. "What are you about?" asked D'Artagnan. "To give 10 francs to this honest fellow," replied Raoul, taking a pistole from his pocket. 10 kicks on his back," said D'Artagnan. "Be off, you little villain, and forget not that I have your address." Friquet, who did not expect to be let off so cheaply, bounded off at a gazelle up the quay of La Rue Dauphine and disappeared. Raoul mounted his horse, and both leisurely took their way to the Rue Tiquetonne. D'Artagnan watched over the youth as if he had been his own son. They arrived without accident at the Hôtel de la Chevrette. The handsome Madeleine announced to D'Artagnan that Planchet had returned, bringing Mousqueton with him, who had heroically borne the extraction of the ball, and was as well as the state would permit. D'Artagnan desired Planchet to be summoned, but he had disappeared. "Then bring some wine," said D'Artagnan. "You are much pleased with yourself," said he to Raoul when they were alone. "Are you not?" "Well, yes," replied Raoul. "It seems to me I did my duty. I defended the king." "And who told you to defend the king?" "The Comte de la Fere himself." "Yes, the king. But today you have not fought for the king. You have fought for Mazarin, which is not quite the same thing." "But you yourself?" Oh, for me, that is another matter. I obey my captain's orders. As for you, your captain is a prince. Understand that rightly. You have no other. But has one ever seen such a wild fellow? Continued he, making himself a Mazarinist and helping to arrest Broussel. Breathe not a word of that, or the Comte de la Fere will be furious. You think the Count will be angry with me? Think it? I'm certain of it. Were it not for that, I should thank you, for you have worked for us. However, I scold you instead of him, and in his place. The storm will blow over more easily, believe me. And moreover, my dear child, continued D'Artagnan, I am making use of the privilege conceded to me by your guardian. I do not understand you, sir, said Raoul. D'Artagnan rose, and taking a letter from his writing desk, presented it to Raoul. The face of the latter became serious when he had cast his eyes upon the paper. Oh, mon Dieu, he said, raising his fine eyes to D'Artagnan, moist with tears. The Count has left Paris without seeing me? He left 4 days ago, said D'Artagnan. But this letter seems to intimate that he is about to incur danger, perhaps death. He, incur danger, death. No, be not anxious. He is traveling on business and will return ere long. I hope you have no repugnance to accept me as your guardian in the interim. Oh, no, Monsieur D'Artagnan, said Raoul. You are such a brave gentleman, and the Comte de la Fere has so much affection for you. Egad, love me too. I will not torment you much, but only on condition that you become a Frondist, my young friend, and a hearty Frondist too. But can I continue to visit Madame de Chevreuse? I should say you could, and the coadjutor and Madame de Longueville. And if the worthy Broussel were there, whom you so stupidly helped arrest, I should tell you to excuse yourself to him at once and kiss him on both cheeks. Well, sir, I will obey you, although I do not understand you. It is unnecessary for you to understand. Hold, continued D'Artagnan, turning toward the door, which had just opened. Here is Monsieur du Vallon, who comes with his coat torn. Yes, but in exchange, said Porthos, covered with perspiration and soiled by dust. In exchange, I have torn many skins. Those wretches want to take away my sword. Deuce take him! What a popular commotion, continued the giant, in his quiet manner. But I knocked down more than 20 with the hilt of Balizard. A draught of wine, D'Artagnan. Oh, I'll answer for you, said the Gascon, filling Porthos's glass to the brim. But when you have drunk, give me your opinion. Upon what? asked Porthos. Look here, resumed D'Artagnan. Here is Monsieur de Bragelonne, who determined at all risks to aid the arrest of Broussel, and whom I had great difficulty to prevent defending Monsieur de Comminges. The devil, said Porthos, and his guardian, what would he have said to that? Do you hear? Interrupted D'Artagnan. Become a Frondist, my friend, belong to the Fronde, and remember that I fill the Count's place in everything. And he jingled his money. Will you come? Said he to Porthos. Where? Asked Porthos, filling a second glass of wine. To present our respects to the cardinal. Porthos swallowed the second glass with the same grace with which he had imbibed the first, took his beaver, and followed D'Artagnan. As for Raoul, he remained bewildered with what he had seen, having been forbidden by D'Artagnan to leave the room until the tumult was over. Chapter 45. The Beggar of St. Eustache. D'Artagnan had calculated that in not going at once to the Palais Royal, he would give Comminges time to arrive before him, and consequently to make the cardinal acquainted with the eminent services which he, D'Artagnan, and his friend had rendered to the Queen's party in the morning. They were indeed admirably received by Mazarin, who paid them numerous compliments, and announced that they were more than half on their way to obtain what they desired, namely, D'Artagnan his captaincy, Porthos his barony. D'Artagnan would have preferred money in hand to all that fine talk, for he knew well that a Mazarin it was easy to promise and hard to perform. But, though he held the cardinal's promises as of little worth, he affected to be completely satisfied, for he was unwilling to discourage Porthos. Whilst the two friends were with the cardinal, the Queen sent for him. Mazarin, thinking that it would be the means of increasing the zeal of his two defenders if he procured them personal thanks from the Queen, motioned them to follow him. D'Artagnan and Porthos pointed to their dusty and torn dresses, But the cardinal shook his head. "Those costumes," he said, "are of more worth than most of those which you will see on the backs of the queen's courtiers. They are costumes of battle." D'Artagnan and Porthos obeyed. The court of Austria was full of gaiety and animation, for, after having gained a victory over the Spaniard, it had just gained another over the people. Broussel had been conducted out of Paris without further resistance, and was at this time in the prison of Saint-Germain, while Blancmesnil, who was arrested at the same time, but whose arrest had been made without difficulty or noise, was safe in the castle of Vincennes. Comminges was near the queen, who was questioning him upon the details of his expedition, and everyone was listening to his account, when D'Artagnan and Porthos were perceived at the door, behind the cardinal. "Ah, madam," said Comminges, hastening to D'Artagnan, "here is one who can tell you better than myself, for he was my protector. Without him, I should probably at this moment be a dead fish in the nets at St. Cloud, for it was a question of nothing less than throwing me into the river. Speak, D'Artagnan, speak." D'Artagnan had been 100 times in the same room with the queen since he had become lieutenant of the Musketeers, but Her Majesty had never once spoken to him. "Well, sir," at last said of Austria, "you are silent after rendering such a service?" "Madam," replied D'Artagnan, "I have not to say, save that my life is ever at your Majesty's service, and that I shall only be happy the day I lose it for you." "I know that, sir. I have known that," said the queen, "a long time. Therefore I am delighted to be able thus publicly to mark my gratitude and my esteem." "Permit me, madam," said D'Artagnan, "to reserve a portion for my friend. Like myself," he laid an emphasis on these words, "an ancient musketeer of the company of Treville. He has done wonders." "His name?" asked the queen. "In the regiment," said D'Artagnan. "He is called Porthos," the queen started, "but his true name is the Chevalier du Vallon." "De Bracieux de Pierrefonds," added Porthos. "These names are too numerous for me to remember them all, and I will content myself with the first," said the queen, graciously. Porthos bowed. At this moment the coadjutor was announced. A cry of surprise ran through the royal assemblage. Although the coadjutor had preached that same morning, it was well known that he leaned much to the side of the Fronde, and Mazarin, in requesting the Archbishop of Paris to make his nephew preach, had evidently had the intention of administering to Monsieur de Retz one of those Italian kicks he so much enjoyed giving. The fact was, in leaving Notre Dame the coadjutor had learned the event of the day. Although almost engaged with the leaders of the Fronde, he had not gone so far, but that retreat was possible should the court offer him the advantages for which he was ambitious, and to which the coadjutorship was but a stepping stone. Monsieur de Retz wished to become archbishop in his uncle's place, and cardinal, like Mazarin, and the popular party could with difficulty accord him favors so entirely royal. He therefore hastened to the palace to congratulate the queen on the Battle of Lens, determined beforehand to act with or against the court, as his congratulations were well or ill received. The coadjutor possessed, perhaps, as much wit as all those put together who were assembled at the court to laugh at him. His speech, therefore, was so well turned that in spite of the great wish felt by the courtiers to laugh, they could find no point on which to vent their ridicule. He concluded by saying that he placed his feeble influence at Her Majesty's command. During the whole time he was speaking, the queen appeared to be well pleased with the coadjutor's harangue, but terminating as it did with such a phrase, the only one which could be caught by the jokers, and turned around and directed a glance toward her favorites, which announced that she delivered up the coadjutor to their tender mercies. Immediately the wits of the court plunged into satire. Nogent Butin, the fool of the court, exclaimed that the queen was very happy to have the succor of religion at such a moment. This caused a universal burst of laughter. The Count of Villeroy said that he did not know how any fear could be entertained for a moment when the court had, to defend itself against the Parliament and the citizens of Paris, His Holiness the coadjutor, who by a signal could raise an army of curates, church porters, and vergers. The Marechal de la Meilleraie added that in case the coadjutor should appear on the field of battle, it would be a pity that he should not be distinguished in the mêlée by wearing a red hat, as Henry IV had been distinguished by his white plume at the Battle of Ivry. During this storm, Gondy, who had it in his power to make it most unpleasant for the jesters, remained calm and stern. The queen at last asked him if he had anything to add to the fine discourse he had just made to her. "Yes, madam," replied the coadjutor. I have to beg you to reflect twice ere you cause a civil war in the kingdom." The queen turned her back, and the laughing recommenced. The coadjutor bowed and left the palace, casting upon the cardinal such a glance as is best understood by mortal foes. That glance was so sharp that it penetrated the heart of Mazarin, who, reading in it a declaration of war, seized D'Artagnan by the arm and said, "If occasion requires, monsieur, you will remember that man who has just gone out, will you not?" "Yes, my lord," he replied. Then, turning toward Porthos, "The devil," said he, "this is a bad look. I dislike these quarrels among men of the church." Gondy withdrew, distributing benedictions on his way, and finding a malicious satisfaction in causing the adherents of his foes to prostrate themselves at his feet. "Oh," he murmured, as he left the threshold of the palace, "ungrateful court, faithless court, cowardly court, I will teach you how to laugh tomorrow, but in another manner." But whilst they were indulging in extravagant joy at the Palais Royal, to increase the hilarity of the queen, Mazarin, a man of sense and whose fear, moreover, gave him foresight, lost no time in making idle and dangerous jokes. He went out after the coadjutor, settled his account, locked up his gold, and had confidential workmen to contrive hiding places in his walls. On his return home, the coadjutor was informed that a young man had come in after his departure and was waiting for him. He started with delight when, on demanding the name of this young man, he learned that it was Louviers. He hastened to his cabinet. Brousel's son was there, still furious, and still bearing bloody marks of his struggle with the king's officers. The only precaution he had taken in coming to the archbishopric was to leave his arquebuse in the hands of a friend. The coadjutor went to him and held out his hand. The young man gazed at him as if he would have read the secret of his heart. "My dear Monsieur Louviers," said the coadjutor, "believe me, I am truly concerned for the misfortune which has happened to you." "Is that true, and do you speak seriously?" asked Louviers. "From the depth of my heart," said Gondy. "In that case, my lord, the time for words is past and the hour for action is at hand. My lord, in 3 days, if you wish it, my father will be out of prison, and in 6 months you may be cardinal." The coadjutor started. "Oh, let us speak frankly," continued Louviers, "and act in a straightforward manner. 30,000 crowns in alms is not given, as you have done for the last 6 months, out of pure Christian charity. That would be too grand. You are ambitious. It is natural. You are a man of genius, and you know your worth. As for me, I hate the court and have but one desire at this moment: vengeance. Give us the clergy and the people, of whom you can dispose, and I will bring you the citizens and the parliament. With these 4 elements, Paris is ours in a week, and believe me, Monsieur Coadjutor, the court will give from fear what it will not give from goodwill." It was now the coadjutor's turn to fix his piercing eyes on Louviers. "But, Monsieur Louviers, are you aware that it is simply civil war you are proposing to me? You have been preparing long enough, my lord, for it to be welcome to you now." "Never mind," said the coadjutor. "You must be well aware that this requires reflection. And how many hours of reflection do you ask?" 12 hours, sir. Is it too long?" "It is now noon. At midnight I will be at your house. If I should not be in, wait for me." "Good. At midnight, my lord." "At midnight, my dear Monsieur Louviers." When once more alone, Gondy sent to summon all the curates with whom he had any connection to his house. 2 hours later, 30 officiating ministers from the most populous, and consequently the most disturbed parishes of Paris, had assembled there. Gondy related to them the insults he had received at the Palais Royal, and retailed the jests of Botin, the Count de Villeroy, and Marechal de la Meilleraie. The curates asked him what was to be done. "Simply this," said the coadjutor. "You are the directors of all consciences. While undermining them the miserable prejudice of respect and fear of kings, teach your flocks that the queen is a tyrant, and repeat often and loudly, so that all may know it, that the misfortunes of France are caused by Mazarin, her lover and her destroyer. Begin this work today, this instant even, and in 3 days I shall expect a result. For the rest, if any one of you have further or better counsel to expound, I will listen to him with the greatest pleasure." 3 curates remained, those of St. Mary, St. Sulpice, and St. Eustache. The others withdrew. "You think, then, that you can help me more efficaciously than your brothers?" said Gandhi. "We hope so," answered the curates. "Let us hear. Monsieur de Saint Mary, you begin." "My lord, I have in my parish a man who might be of the greatest use to you." "Who and what is this man?" "A shopkeeper in the Rue de Lombards, who has great influence upon the commerce of his quarter." "What is his name?" "He is named Planchet, who himself also caused a rising about 6 weeks ago, but as he was searched for after this emeute, he disappeared." "And can you find him?" "I hope so. I think he has not been arrested, and as I am his wife's confessor, if she knows where he is, I shall know it too." "Very well, sir. Find this man, and when you have found him, bring him to me. We will be with you at 6 o'clock, my lord." "Go, my dear curate, and may God assist you." "And you, sir?" continued Gandhi, turning to the curate of St. Sulpice. "Aye, my lord," said the latter. "I know a man who has rendered great services to a very popular prince, and who would make an excellent leader of revolt. Him I can place at your disposal. It is Count de Rochefort. I know him also, but unfortunately he is not in Paris." "My lord, he has been for 3 days at the Rue Cassette." "And wherefore has he not been to see me?" "He was told, my lord will pardon me." "Certainly, speak." "That your lordship was about to treat with the court." Gandhi bit his lips. "They are mistaken. Bring him here at 8 o'clock, sir, and may heaven bless you as I bless you. And now, 'tis your turn," said the coadjutor, turning to the last that remained. "Have you anything as good to offer me as the 2 gentlemen who have left us?" "Better, my lord." "Diable, think what a solemn engagement you are making. One is offered a wealthy shopkeeper, the other a count. You are going, then, to offer a prince, are you? I offer you a beggar, my lord." "Ah, said Gandhi, reflecting. "You are right, sir. Someone who could raise a legion of paupers who choke up the crossings of Paris. Someone who would know how to cry aloud to them, that all France might hear it, that it is Mazarin who has reduced them to poverty." "Exactly your man." "Bravo. And the man?" "A plain and simple beggar, as I have said, my lord, who asks for alms, as he gives holy water, a practice he has carried on for 6 years on the steps of St. Eustache." "And you say that he has a great influence over his compeers." "Are you aware, my lord, that mendacity is an organized body, a kind of association of those who have nothing against those who have everything, an association in which every one takes a share, one that elect a leader?" "Yes, I have heard it said," replied the coadjutor. "Well, the man whom I offer you is a general syndic." "And what do you know of him?" "Nothing, my lord, except that he is tormented with remorse." "What makes you think so?" "On the 20th of every month he makes me say a mass for the repose of the soul of one who died a violent death. Yesterday I said this mass again." "And his name?" "Maillard. But I do not think it is his right one. And think you that we should find him at this hour at his post?" "Certainly." "Let us go and see your beggar, sir, and if he is such as you describe him, you are right. It will be you who have discovered the true treasure." Gandhi dressed himself as an officer, put on a felt cap with a red feather, hung on a long sword, buckled spurs to his boots, wrapped himself in an ample cloak, and followed the curate. The coadjutor and a companion passed through all the streets lying between the archbishopric and the St. Eustache church, watching carefully to ascertain the popular feeling. The people were in an excited mood, but, like a swarm of frightened bees, seemed not to know at what point to concentrate, and it was very evident that if leaders of the people were not provided, all this agitation would pass off in idle buzzing. On arriving at the Rue de Provers, the curate pointed toward the square before the church. "Stop," he said. "There he is at his post." Gandhi looked at the spot indicated and perceived a beggar seated in a chair and leaning against one of the moldings. A little basin was near him, and he held a holy water brush in his hand. "Is it by permission that he remains there?" asked Gandhi. "No, my lord. These places are bought. I believe this man paid his predecessor 100 pistoles for his." "The rascal is rich, then?" "Some of those men sometimes die worth 20,000 and 25 and 30,000 francs, and sometimes more." "Hum," said Gandhi, laughing. "I was not aware my alms were so well invested." In the meantime they were advancing toward the square, and the moment the coadjutor and the curate put their feet on the first church step, the mendicant arose and proffered his brush. He was a man between 66 and 68 years of age, little, rather stout, with gray hair and light eyes. His countenance denoted the struggle between two opposite principles, a wicked nature, subdued by determination, perhaps by repentance. He started on seeing the cavalier with the curate. The latter and the coadjutor touched the brush with the tips of their fingers and made the sign of the cross. The coadjutor threw a piece of money into the hat, which was on the ground. "Maillard," began the curate, "this gentleman and I have come to talk with you a little." "With me," said the mendicant. "It is a great honor for a poor distributor of holy water." There was an ironical tone in his voice which he could not quite disguise and which astonished the coadjutor. "Yes," continued the curate, apparently accustomed to this tone. "Yes, we wish to know your opinion of the events of today, and what you have heard said by people going in and out of the church." The mendicant shook his head. "These are melancholy doings, your reverence, which always fall again upon the poor. As to what is said, everybody is discontented, everybody complains, but everybody means nobody." "Explain yourself, my good friend," said the coadjutor. "I mean that all these cries, all these complaints, these curses, produce nothing but storms and flashes, and that is all. But the lightning will not strike until there is a hand to guide it." "My friend," said Gandhi, "you seem to be a clever and a thoughtful man. Are you disposed to take a part in a little civil war? Should we have one, and put the command of the leader? Should we find one, your personal influence and the influence you have acquired over your comrades?" "Yes, sir, provided this war were approved by the church and would advance the end I wish to attain, I mean the remission of my sins. The war will not only be approved of, but directed by the church. As for the remission of your sins, we have the Archbishop of Paris, who has the very greatest power at the court of Rome, and even the coadjutor, who possesses some plenary indulgences. We will recommend you to him." "Consider, Maillard," said the curate, "that I have recommended you to this gentleman, who is a powerful lord, and that I have made myself responsible for you. I know, Monsieur le Curé," said the beggar, "that you have always been very kind to me, and therefore I, in my turn, will be serviceable to you. And do you think your power as great with fraternity as Monsieur le Curé told me it was just now?" "I think they have some esteem for me," said the mendicant with pride, "and that not only will they obey me, but wherever I go they will follow me. And could you count on 50 resolute men, good, unemployed, but active souls, brawlers, capable of bringing down the walls of the Palais Royal by crying, 'Down with Mazarin,' as fell those at Jericho?" "I think," said the beggar, "I can undertake things more difficult and more important than that." Ah, said Gandhi, "you will undertake, then, some night to throw up some 10 barricades? I will undertake to throw up 50, and when the day comes, to defend them." "I faith," exclaimed Gandhi, "you speak with certainty that gives me pleasure, and since Monsieur le Curé can answer for you—" "I answer for him," said the curate. "Here is a bag containing 500 pistoles in gold. Make all your arrangements, and tell me where I shall be able to find you this evening at 10 o'clock. It must be on some elevated place, whence a given signal may be seen in every part of Paris. Shall I give you a line for the vicar of St. Jacques, Delaware-la-Boucherie? He will let you into the rooms in his tower," said the curate. "Capital," answered the mendicant. "Then," said the coadjutor, "this evening at 10 o'clock, and if I am pleased with you, another bag of 500 pistoles will be at your disposal." The eyes of the mendicant dashed with cupidity, but he quickly suppressed his emotion. "This evening, sir," he replied, "all will be ready." Chapter 46. The Tower of St. Jacques, Delaware-la-Boucherie. At 5:45, Monsieur de Gondi, having finished his business, returned to the archiepiscopal palace. At 6 o'clock the curate of St. Mary was announced. The coadjutor glanced rapidly behind and saw that he was followed by another man. The curate then entered, followed by Planchet. "Your Holiness," said the curate, "here is the person of whom I had the honor to speak to you." Planchet saluted in the manner of one accustomed to fine houses. "And you are disposed to serve the cause of the people?" asked Gandhi. "Most undoubtedly," said Planchet. "I am a Frondist for my heart. You see in me, such as I am, a person sentenced to be hung. And on what account?" I rescue from the hands of Mazarenes police a noble lord whom they were conducting back to the Bastille, where he had been for 5 years. Will you name him? Oh, you know him well, my lord. It is Count de Rochefort. Ah, really, yes, said the coadjutor. I have heard this affair mentioned. You raised the whole district, so they told me. Very nearly, replied Planchet, with a self-satisfied air. And your business is that of a confectioner in the Rue de Lombards. Explain to me how it happens that, following so peaceful a business, you had such warlike inclinations. Why does my lord, belonging to the church, now receive me in the dress of an officer, with a sword at his side and spurs to his boots? Not badly answered, I faith, said Gondy, laughing. But I have, you must know, always had, in spite of my bands, warlike inclinations. Well, my lord, before I became a confectioner, I myself was 3 years sergeant in the Piedmontese regiment, and before I became sergeant I was for 18 months the servant of Monsieur d'Artagnan. The lieutenant of Musketeers, asked Gondy. Himself, my lord. But he is said to be a furious Mazarinist. Phew, whistled Planchet. What do you mean by that? Nothing, my lord. Monsieur d'Artagnan belongs to service. Monsieur d'Artagnan makes it his business to defend the cardinal, who pays him, as much as we make it ours, we citizens, to attack him, whom he robs. You are an intelligent fellow, my friend. Can we count upon you? You may count upon me, my lord, provided you want to make a complete upheaval of the city. 'Tis that exactly. How many men, think you could collect together tonight? 200 muskets and 500 halberds. Let there be only one man in every district who can do as much, and by tomorrow we shall have quite a powerful army. Are you disposed to obey Count de Rochefort? I would follow him to hell, and that is saying not a little, as I believe him entirely capable of the descent. Bravo! By what sign tomorrow shall we be able to distinguish friends from foes? Every Frondist must put a knot of straw in his hat. Good. Give the watchword. Do you want money? Money never comes amiss at any time, my lord. If one has it not, one must do without it. With it, matters go on much better and more rapidly. Gondy went to a box and drew forth the bag. Here are 500 pistoles, he said, and if the action goes off, well, you may reckon upon a similar sum tomorrow. I will give a faithful account of some to your lordship, said Planchet, putting the bag under his arm. That is right. I recommend the cardinal to your attention. Make your mind easy, he is in good hands. Planchet went out, the curate remaining for a moment. Are you satisfied, my lord? He asked. Yes. He appears to be a resolute fellow. Well, he will do more than he has promised. He will do wonders then. The curate rejoined Planchet, who was waiting for him on the stairs. 10 minutes later the curate of St. Sulpice was announced. As soon as the door of Gondy's study was open, a man rushed in. It was the Count de Rochefort. "'Tis you, then, my dear Count," cried Gondy, offering his hand. "You have made up your mind at last, my lord," said Rochefort. "It has been made up a long time," said Gondy. "Let us say no more on the subject. You tell me so. I believe you. Well, we're going to give a ball to Mazarine." "I hope so. And when will the dance begin?" "The invitations are given for this evening," said the coadjutor, "but the violins will not begin to play until tomorrow morning. You may reckon upon me and upon 50 soldiers which the Chevalier Emirs has promised me whenever I need them." "Upon 50 soldiers?" "Yes. He is making recruits, and he will lend them to me. If any are missing when the fete is over, I shall replace them." "Good, my dear Rochefort. But that is not all. What have you done with Monsieur de Beaufort?" "He is in Vendôme, where he will wait until I write to him to return to Paris." "Write to him. Now's the time." "You are sure of your enterprise?" "Yes, but he must make haste, for hardly will the people of Paris have revolted before we shall have a score of princes begging to lead them. If he defers, he will find the place of honor taken. Shall I send word to him as coming from you?" "Yes, certainly." "Shall I tell him that he can count on you?" "To the end." "And you will leave the command to him?" "Of the war, yes, but in politics." "You must know it is not his element. He must leave me to negotiate for my cardinal's hat in my own fashion." "You care about it, then, so much?" Since they force me to wear a hat of form which does not become me, said Gandhi, I wish at least that the hat should be red. One must not dispute matters of taste and colors, said Rochefort, laughing. I answer for his consent. How soon can he be here? In 5 days. Let him come, and he will find a change. I will answer for it. Therefore, go and collect your 50 men and hold yourself in readiness. For what? For everything. Is there any signal for the general rally? A knot of straw in a hat. Very good. Adieu, my lord. Adieu, my dear Rochefort. Ah, Monsieur Mazarin, said Rochefort, leading off his curate, who had not found an opportunity of uttering a single word during the foregoing dialogue. You will see whether I am too old to be a man of action. It was 9:30 o'clock, and the coadjutor required half an hour to go from the Archbishop's palace to the tower of St. Jacques Delaware La Boucherie. He remarked that a light was burning in one of the highest windows of the tower. Good, said he. Our syndic is at his post. He knocked, and the door was opened. The vicar himself awaited him, conducted him to the top of the tower, and when there pointed to a little door, placed a light which he had brought with him in a corner of the wall, that the coadjutor might be able to find it on his return, and went down again. Although the key was in the door, the coadjutor knocked. Come in, said a voice which he recognized as that of the mendicant, whom he found lying on a kind of truckle bed. He rose on the entrance of the coadjutor, and at that moment 10 o'clock struck. Well, said Gandhi, have you kept your word with me? Not exactly, replied the mendicant. How is that? You asked me for 500 men, did you not? Well, I have 10,000 for you. You are not boasting? Do you wish for a proof? Yes. There were 3 candles alight, each of which burnt before a window, one looking upon the city, the other upon the Palais Royal, and a third upon the Rue Saint-Denis. The man went silently to each of the candles and blew them out one after the other. What are you doing? Asked the coadjutor. I have given the signal. For what? For the barricades. When you leave this, you will behold my men at work. Only take care you do not break your legs in stumbling over some chain, or your neck by falling in a hole. Good. There is your money, the same sum as that you have received already. Now remember that you are a general, and do not go and drink. For 20 years I have tasted nothing but water. The man took the bag from the hands of the coadjutor, who heard the sound of his fingers counting and handling the gold pieces. Ah, said the coadjutor. You are avaricious, my good fellow. The mendicant sighed and threw down the bag. Must I always be the same, said he, and shall I never succeed in overcoming the old leaven? Oh, misery, oh, vanity! You take it, however. Yes, but I make hereby a vow in your presence, to employ all that remains to me in pious works. His face was pale and drawn, like that of a man who had just undergone some inward struggle. Singular man, muttered Gandhi, taking his hat to go away. But on turning around he saw the beggar between him and the door. His first idea was that this man intended to do him some harm, but on the contrary, he saw him fall on his knees before him with his hands clasped. Your blessing, your holiness. Before you go, I beseech you, he cried. Your holiness, said Gandhi. My friend, you take me for someone else. No, your holiness, I take you for what you are, that is to say, the coadjutor. I recognize you at the first glance. Gandhi smiled. And you want my blessing? He said. Yes, I have need of it. The mendicant uttered these words in a tone of such humility, such earnest repentance, that Gandhi placed his hand upon him and gave him his benediction with all the unction of which he was capable. Now, said Gandhi, there is a communion between us. I have blessed you, and you are sacred to me. Come, have you committed some crime, pursued by human justice, from which I can protect you? The beggar shook his head. The crime which I have committed, my lord, has no call upon human justice, and you can only deliver me from it by blessing me frequently, as you have just done. Come, be candid, said the coadjutor. You have not all your life followed the trade which you do now? No, my lord, I have pursued it for 6 years only. And previously, where were you? In the Bastille. And before you went to Bastille? I will tell you, my lord, on the day when you are willing to hear my confession. Good. At whatsoever hour of the day or night you may present yourself, remember that I shall be ready to give you absolution." "Thank you, my lord," said the mendicant in a hoarse voice, "but I am not yet ready to receive it." "Very well. Adieu." "Adieu, your holiness," said the mendicant, opening the door and bending low before the prelate. Chapter 47. The Riot. It was about 11 o'clock at night. Gandhi had not walked 100 steps ere he perceived the strange change which had been made in the streets of Paris. The whole city seemed peopled with fantastic beings. Silent shadows were seen unpaving the streets, and others dragging and upsetting great wagons, whilst others again dug ditches large enough to ingle whole regiments of horsemen. These active beings flitted here and there like so many demons completing some unknown labor. These were the beggars of the Court of Miracles, the agent of the giver of holy water in the square of St. Eustache, preparing barricades for the morrow. Gandhi gazed on these deeds of darkness, on these nocturnal laborers, with a kind of fear. He asked himself if, after having called forth these foul creatures from their dens, he should have the power of making them retire again. He felt almost inclined to cross himself when one of these beings happened to approach him. He reached the Rue Saint-Honoré and went up it toward the Rue de la Ferronnerie. There the aspect changed. Here was the tradesmen who were running from shop to shop. Their doors seemed closed like their shutters, but they were only pushed to in such a manner as to open and allow the men, who seemed fearful of showing what they carried, to enter, closing immediately. These men were shopkeepers, who had arms to lend to those who had none. One individual went from door to door, bending under the weight of swords, guns, muskets, and every kind of weapon, which he deposited as fast as he could. By the light of a lantern, the coadjutor recognized Planchet. The coadjutor proceeded onward to the quay by way of the Rue de l'Aumône. There he found groups of bourgeois clad in black cloaks or gray, according as they belonged to the upper or lower bourgeoisie. They were standing motionless, while single men passed from one group to another. All these cloaks, gray or black, were raised behind by the point of a sword, or before by the barrel of an arquebuse or a musket. On reaching the Pont Neuf, the coadjutor found it strictly guarded, and a man approached him. "Who are you?" asked the man. "I do not know you for one of us." "Then it is because you do not know your friends, my dear Monsieur Louviers," said the coadjutor, raising his hat. Louviers recognized him and bowed. Gandhi continued his way and went as far as the Tour de Nesle. There he saw a lengthy chain of people gliding under the walls. They might be said to be a procession of ghosts, for they were all wrapped in white cloaks. When they reached a certain spot, these men appeared to be annihilated, one after the other, as if the earth had opened under their feet. Gandhi, edged into a corner, saw them vanish from the first until the last but one. The last raised his eyes, to ascertain, doubtless, that neither his companions nor himself had been watched, and in spite of the darkness, he perceived Gandhi. He walked straight up to him and placed a pistol to his throat. "Halloo, Monsieur de Rochefort," said Gandhi, laughing. "Are you a boy to play with firearms?" Rochefort recognized the voice. "Ah, it is you, my lord," said he. "The very same. What people are you leading thus into the bowels of the earth?" "My 50 recruits from the Chevalier d'Emirs, who are destined into light cavalry, and who have only received as yet for their equipment their white cloaks." "And where are you going?" "To the house of one of my friends, a sculptor. Only we enter by the trap through which he lets down his marble." "Very good," said Gandhi, shaking Rochefort by the hand, who descended in his turn and closed the trap after him. It was now 1 o'clock in the morning, and the coadjutor returned home. He opened a window and leaned out to listen. A strange, incomprehensible, unearthly sound seemed to pervade the whole city. One felt that something unusual and terrible was happening in all the streets, now dark as ocean's most unfathomable caves. From time to time a dull sound was heard, like that of a rising tempest or a billow of the sea, but nothing clear, nothing distinct, nothing intelligible. It was like those mysterious subterraneous noises that precede an earthquake. The work of revolt continued the whole night thus. The next morning, on awaking, Paris seemed to be startled at her own appearance. It was like a besieged town. Armed men, shouldering muskets, watched over barricades with menacing looks. Words of command, patrols, arrests, executions, even, were encountered at every step. Those bearing plumed hats and gold swords were stopped and made to cry, "Long live Broussel! Down with Mazarin!" And whoever refused to comply with the ceremony was hooted at, spat upon, and even beaten. They had not yet begun to slay, but it was well felt that the inclination to do so was not wanting. The barricades had been pushed as far as the Palais Royal, from the Rue de Bons Enfants to that of Ferronnerie, from the Rue Saint-Thomas du Louvre to the Pont Neuf, from the Rue Richelieu to the Porte Saint-Honoré. There were more than 10,000 armed men. Those who were at the front hurled defiance at the impassive sentinels of the regiment of guards posted around the Palais Royal, the gates of which were closed behind them, a precaution which made their situation precarious. Among these thousands moved, in bands numbering from 100 to 200, pale and haggard men, clothed in rags, who bore a sort of standard on which was inscribed these words, "Behold the misery of the people." Wherever these men passed, frenzied cries were heard, and there were so many of these bands that the cries would be heard in all directions. The astonishment of Mazarin and of Austria was great when it was announced to them that the city, which the previous evening they had left entirely tranquil, had awakened to such feverish commotion. Nor would either the one or the other believe the reports that were brought to them, declaring they would rather rely on the evidence of their own eyes and ears. Then a window was opened, and when they saw and heard they were convinced. Mazarin shrugged his shoulders and pretended to despise the populace, but he turned visibly pale and ran to his closet, trembling all over, locked up his gold and jewels in his caskets, and put his finest diamonds on his fingers. As for the queen, furious, and left to her own guidance, she went for Marechal de la Meilleraie and desired him to take as many men as he pleased, and to go and see what was the meaning of this pleasantry. The marshal was ordinarily very adventurous, and was wont to hesitate at nothing, and he had that lofty contempt for the populace which army officers usually profess. He took 150 men, and attempted to go out by the Pont du Louvre, but there he met Rochefort and his 50 horsemen, attended by more than 500 men. The marshal made no attempt to force that barrier, and returned up the quay. But at Pont-Neuf he found Louviers and his bourgeois. This time the marshal charged, but he was welcomed by musket shots, while stones fell like hail from all the windows. He left there 3 men. He beat a retreat toward the market, but there he met Planchet with his halberdiers. Their halberds were leveled at him threateningly. He attempted to ride over those gray cloaks, but the gray cloaks held their ground, and the marshal retired toward the Rue Saint-Honoré, leaving 4 of his guards dead on the field of battle. The marshal then entered the Rue Saint-Honoré, but there he was opposed by the barricades of the Mendicant of Saint Eustache. They were guarded not only by armed men, but even by women and children. Master Fouquet, the owner of a pistol and a sword which Louviers had given him, had organized a company of rogues like himself and was making a tremendous racket. The marshal thought this barrier not so well fortified as the others and determined to break through it. He dismounted 20 men to make a breach in the barricade, whilst he and others, remaining on their horses, were to protect the assailants. The 20 men marched straight toward the barrier, but from behind the beams, from among the wagon wheels and from the heights of the rocks, a terrible fusillade burst forth, and at the same time Planchet's halberdiers appeared at the corner of the Cemetery of the Innocents, and Louviers' bourgeois at the corner of the Rue de la Monnaie. The Marechal de la Meilleraie was caught between 2 fires, but he was brave and made up his mind to die where he was. He returned blow for blow, and cries of pain began to be heard in the crowd. The guards, more skillful, did greater execution, but the bourgeois, more numerous, overwhelmed them with a veritable hurricane of iron. Men fell around him as they had fallen at Rocroi or at Lerida. Fontrailles, his aide-de-camp, had an arm broken. His horse had received a bullet in his neck, and he had difficulty in controlling him, maddened by pain. In short, he had reached that supreme moment when the bravest feel a shudder in their veins, when suddenly, in the direction of the Rue de l'Hérissie, the crowd opened crying, "Long live the coadjutor!" And Gondy, in surplice and cloak, appeared, moving tranquil in the midst of the fusillade and bestowing his benedictions to the right and left, as undisturbed as if he were leading a procession of the Fête Dieu. All fell to their knees. The marshal recognized him and hastened to meet him. "Get me out of this, in heaven's name," he said, "or I shall leave my carcass here and those of all my men." A great tumult arose, in the midst of which even the noise of thunder could not have been heard. Gondy raised his hand and demanded silence. All were still. "My children," he said, "this is the Marechal de la Meilleraie, as to whose intentions you have been deceived, and who pledges himself, on returning to Louvre, to demand of the Queen in your name our Brousel's release." "You pledge yourself to that, Marshal?" added Gondy, turning to La Meilleraie. "Morbleu!" cried the latter. "I should say that I do pledge myself to it. I had no hope of getting off so easily." "He gives you his word of honor," said Gondy. The Marshal raised his hand in token of assent. "Long live the coadjutor!" cried the crowd. Some voices even added, "Long live the Marshal!" But all took up the cry in chorus, "Down with Mazarin!" The crowd gave place. The barricade was opened, and the Marshal, with the remnant of his company, retreated, preceded by Fouquet and his bandits, some of them making a presence of beating drums and others imitating the sound of the trumpet. It was almost a triumphal procession. Only, behind the guards, the barricades were closed again. The Marshal bit his fingers. In the meantime, as we have said, Mazarin was in his closet, putting his affairs in order. He called for D'Artagnan. But in the midst of such tumult he little expected to see him, D'Artagnan not being on service. In about 10 minutes D'Artagnan appeared at the door, followed by the inseparable Porthos. "Ah, come in, Monsieur D'Artagnan," cried the cardinal, "and welcome your friend too. But what is going on in this accursed Paris?" "What is going on, my lord?" "Nothing good," replied D'Artagnan, shaking his head. "The town is in open revolt, and just now, as I was crossing the Rue Montorgueil with Monsieur du Vallon, who is here, and is your humble servant, they wanted, in spite of my uniform, or perhaps because of my uniform, to make us cry, 'Long live Broussel.' And must I tell you, my lord, what they wished us to cry as well?" "Speak, speak." "Down with Mazarin." "I' faith, the treasonable word is out." Mazarin smiled, but became very pale. "And you did cry?" he asked. "I' faith, no," said D'Artagnan. "I was not in voice. Monsieur du Vallon has a cold and did not cry either." "Then, my lord—" "Then what?" asked Mazarin. "Look at my hat and cloak." And D'Artagnan displayed 4 gunshot holes in his cloak and 2 in his beaver. As for Porthos's coat, a blow from a halberd had cut it open on the flank, and a pistol shot had cut his feather in 2. "Diavolo!" said the cardinal, pensively gazing at the 2 friends with lively admiration. "I should have cried, I should." At this moment the tumult was heard nearer. Mazarin wiped his forehead and looked around him. He had a great desire to go to the window, but he dared not. "See what is going on, Monsieur D'Artagnan," said he. D'Artagnan went to the window with his habitual composure. "Oh ho!" said he. "What is this?" Marechal de la Meilleraie returning without a hat, Fontrails with his arm in a sling, wounded guards, horses bleeding. And then, what are the sentinels about? "They are aiming. They're going to fire. They have received orders to fire on the people if the people approach the Palais Royal," exclaimed Mazarin. "But if they fire, all is lost," cried D'Artagnan. "We have the gates." "The gates!" "To hold for 5 minutes. The gates. They will be torn down, twisted into iron wire, ground to powder." "God's death, don't fire!" screamed D'Artagnan, throwing open the window. In spite of this recommendation, which, owing to noise, could scarcely have been heard, 2 or 3 musket shots resounded, succeeded by a terrible discharge. The balls might be heard peppering the façade of the Palais Royal, and one of them, passing under D'Artagnan's arm, entered and broke a mirror in which Porthos was complacently admiring himself. "Alack! Alack!" cried the cardinal. "A Venetian glass!" "Oh, my lord," said D'Artagnan, quietly shutting the window, "it is not worth while weeping yet. For probably an hour hence there will not be one of your mirrors remaining in the Palais Royal, whether they be Venetian or Parisian." "But what do you advise, then?" asked Mazarin, trembling. "Egad, to give up Broussel as they demand." "What the devil do you want a member of the Parliament? He is of no earthly use to anybody." "And you, Monsieur du Vallon, is that your advice?" "What would you do?" "I should give up Broussel," said Porthos. Come with me, gentlemen," exclaimed Mazarin. "I will go and discuss the matter with the Queen." He stopped at the end of the corridor and said, "I can count upon you, gentlemen, can I not?" "We do not give ourselves twice over," said D'Artagnan. "We have given ourselves to you. Command, we shall obey." "Very well, then," said Mazarin. "Enter this cabinet and wait till I come back." And turning off, he entered the drawing-room by another door. Chapter 48. The riot becomes a revolution. The closet into which D'Artagnan and Porthos had been ushered was separated from the drawing-room where the queen was by tapestry curtains only, and this thin partition enabled them to hear all that passed in the adjoining room, whilst the aperture between the two hangings, small as it was, permitted them to see. The queen was standing in the room, pale with anger. Her self-control, however, was so great that it might have been imagined that she was calm. Comminges, Villequier, and Guitant were behind her, and the women again were behind the men. The Chancellor Sequier, who 20 years previously had persecuted her so ruthlessly, stood before her, relating how his carriage had been smashed, how he had been pursued and had rushed into Hotel Dio, that the hotel was immediately invaded, pillaged, and devastated. Happily, he had time to reach a closet hidden behind tapestry, in which he was secreted by an old woman, together with his brother, the Bishop of Meaux. Then the danger was so imminent, the rioters came so near, uttering such threats, that the Chancellor thought his last hour had come and confessed himself to his brother priest, so as to be all ready to die in case he was discovered. Fortunately, however, he had not been taken. The people, believing that he had escaped by some back entrance, retired and left him at liberty to retreat. Then, disguised in the clothes of the Marquis Dio, he had left the hotel, stumbling over the bodies of an officer and 2 guards who had been killed whilst defending the street door. During the recital, Mazarin entered and glided noiselessly up to the queen to listen. "Well," said the queen when the Chancellor had finished speaking, "what do you think of it all?" "I think that matters look very gloomy, madam. But what step would you propose to me?" "I could propose one to your majesty, but I dare not." You may, sir," said the queen with a bitter smile. "You were not so timid once." The Chancellor reddened and stammered some words. "It is not a question of the past, but of the present," said the queen. "You said you could give me advice. What is it?" "Madam," said the Chancellor, hesitating, "it would be to release Broussel." The queen, although already pale, became visibly paler, and her face was contracted. "Release Broussel!" she cried. "Never." At this moment steps were heard in the anteroom, and without any announcement the Marechal de la Meilleraie appeared at the door. "Ah, there you are, Marechal," cried Anne of Austria joyfully. "I trust you have brought this rabble to reason." "Madam," replied the Marechal, "I have left 3 men on the Pont Neuf for the Halle, 6 at the corner of the Rue de l'Arbre, and 2 at the door of your palace. 15 in all. I have brought away 10 or 12 wounded. I know not where I have left my hat, and in all probability I should have been left with my hat, had the coadjutor not arrived in time to rescue me." "Ah, indeed," said the queen. "It would have much astonished me if that low cur, with his distorted legs, had not been mixed up with all this." "Madam," said La Meilleraie, "do not say too much against it before me, for the service he rendered me is still fresh." "Very good," said the queen. "Be as grateful as you like. It does not implicate me. You are here safe and sound. That is all I wish for. You are not only welcome, but welcome back." "Yes, madam, but I only came back on one condition, that I would transmit to your majesty the will of the people." "The will!" exclaimed the queen, frowning. Oh, Monsieur Marechal, you must indeed have found yourself in wondrous peril to have undertaken so strange a commission." The irony with which these words were uttered did not escape the Marechal. "Pardon, madam," he said. "I am not a lawyer. I am a mere soldier, and probably, therefore, I do not quite comprehend the value of certain words. I ought to have said the wishes and not the will of the people. As for what you do me the honor to say, I presume you mean I was afraid." The queen smiled. "Well, then, madam, yes, I did feel fear, and though I have been through 12 pitched battles, and I cannot count how many charges and skirmishes, I own for the 3rd time in my life I was afraid. Yes, and I would rather face your majesty, however threatening your smile, than face those demons who accompanied me hither, and who sprung from I know not whence, unless from deepest hell." "Bravo," said D'Artagnan in a whisper Porthos. well answered. Well, said the queen, biting her lips, whilst her courtiers looked at each other with surprise, what is the desire of my people? That Brousel shall be given up to them, madam. Never, said the queen, never. Your majesty is mistress, said La Meilleraie, retreating a few steps. Where are you going, Marichal? Asked the queen, to give your majesty's reply to those who await it. Stay, Marichal, I will not appear to parley with rebels. Madam, I have pledged my word, and unless you order me to be arrested, I shall be forced to return. And of Austria's eyes shot glances of fire. Oh, that is no impediment, sir, said she. I have had greater men than you arrested. Guetant. Mazarin sprang forward. Madam, said he, if I dared in my turn advise, would it be to give up Brousel, sir? If so, you can spare yourself the trouble. No, said Mazarin, although perhaps that counsel is as good as any other. Then what may it be? To call for Monsieur le Coadjuteur. The coadjutor, cried the queen, that dreadful mischief maker. It is he who has raised all this revolt. The more reason, said Mazarin. If he has raised it, he can put it down. And hold, madam, suggested Comminges, who was near a window, out of which he could see. Hold, the moment is a happy one, for there he is now, giving his blessing in the square of the Palais Royal. The queen sprang to window. It is true, she said. The arch-hypocrite, see. I see, said Mazarin, that everybody kneels before him, although he be but coadjutor, whilst I, were I in his place, though I am cardinal, should be torn to pieces. I persist then, madam, in my wish, he laid an emphasis on the word, that your majesty should receive the coadjutor. And wherefore do you not say, like the rest, your will? Replied the queen in a low voice. Mazarin bowed. Monsieur le Maréchal, said the queen, after a moment's reflection, go and find the coadjutor and bring him to me. And what shall I say to the people? That they must have patience, said N, as I have. The fiery Spanish woman spoke in a tone so imperative that the Maréchal made no reply. He bowed and went out. D'Artagnan turned to Porthos. How will this end? He said. We shall soon see, said Porthos in his tranquil way. In the meantime, and of Austria approached Comminges and conversed with him in a subdued tone, whilst Mazarin glanced uneasily at the corner occupied by D'Artagnan and Porthos. Ere long the door opened, and the Maréchal entered, followed by the coadjutor. There, madam, he said, is Monsieur Gondy, who hastens to obey your majesty's summons. The queen advanced a few steps to meet him, and then stopped, cold, severe, unmoved, with her lower lip scornfully protruded. Gondy bowed respectfully. Well, sir, said the queen, what is your opinion of this riot? That it is no longer a riot, madam, he replied, but a revolt. The revolt is at the door of those who think my people can rebel, cried, and unable to dissimulate before the coadjutor, whom she looked upon, and probably with reason, as the promoter of the tumult. Revolt. Thus it is called by those who have wished for this demonstration, and who are, perhaps, the cause of it. But wait! The king's authority will put all this to rights. Was it to tell me that, madam, coldly replied Gondy, that your majesty admitted me to the honor of entering your presence? No, my dear coadjutor, said Mazarin, it was to ask your advice in the unhappy dilemma in which we find ourselves. Is it true, asked Gondy, feigning astonishment, that her majesty summoned me to ask for my opinion? Yes, said the queen, it is requested. The coadjutor bowed. Your majesty wishes, then, you to say what you would do in her place. Mazarin hastened to reply. The coadjutor looked at the queen, who replied by a sign in the affirmative. Were I in her majesty's place, said Gondy coldly, I should not hesitate. I should release Brousel. And if I do not give him up, what think you will be the result? Exclaimed the queen. I believe that not a stone in Paris will remain unturned. Put in the Maréchal. It was not your opinion that I asked, said the queen, sharply, without even turning around. If it is I whom your majesty interrogates, replied the coadjutor in the same calm manner, I reply that I hold Monsieur le Maréchal's opinion in every respect. The color mounted to the queen's face. Her fine blue eyes seemed to star out her head, and her carmine lips, compared by all the poets of the day to a pomegranate in flower, were trembling with anger. Mazarin himself, who was well accustomed to the domestic outbreaks of this disturbed household, was alarmed. "Give up Broussel," she cried. "Fine counsel, indeed. Upon my word, one can easily see it comes from a priest." Gondy remained firm, and the abuse of the day seemed to glide over his head as the sarcasms of the evening before had done. But hatred and revenge were accumulating in his heart silently and drop by drop. He looked coldly at the queen, who nudged Mazarin to make him say something in his turn. Mazarin, according to his custom, was thinking much and saying little. "Ho, ho," said he. "Good advice of a friend. I, too, would give up that good Monsieur Broussel, dead or alive, and all would be at an end." "If you yield him dead, all will indeed be at an end, my lord, but quite otherwise than you mean." "Did I say dead or alive?" replied Mazarin. "It was only a way of speaking. You know I am not familiar with the French language, which you, Monsieur le Coadjuteur, both speak and write so well." "This is a council of state," D'Artagnan remarked to Porthos, "but we held better ones at La Rochelle with Athos and Aramis." "At the Saint Gervais bastion," said Porthos. "There and elsewhere." The coadjutor let the storm pass over his head and resumed, still with the same tranquillity. "Madam, if the opinion I have submitted to you does not please you, it is doubtless because you have better counsels to follow. I know too well the wisdom of the queen and that of her advisers, to suppose that they will leave the capital long in trouble that may lead to a revolution." "Thus, then, it is your opinion," said Anne of Austria, with a sneer and biting her lips with rage, "that yesterday's riot, which today is already rebellion, tomorrow may become a revolution?" "Yes, madam," replied the coadjutor gravely. "But if I am to believe you, sir, the people seem to have thrown off all restraint." "It is a bad year for kings," said Gondy, shaking his head. "Look at England, madam." "Yes, but fortunately we have no Oliver Cromwell in France," replied the queen. "Who knows?" said Gondy. "Such men are like thunderbolts. One recognizes them only when they have struck." Every one shuddered, and there was a moment of silence, during which the queen pressed her hand to her side, evidently to still the beatings of her heart. "Porthos," murmured D'Artagnan, "look well at that priest." "Yes," said Porthos, "I see him. What then?" "Well, he is a man." Porthos looked at D'Artagnan in astonishment. Evidently he did not understand his meaning. "Your Majesty," continued the coadjutor pitilessly, "is about to take such measures as seem good to you, but I foresee that they will be violent, and such as will still further exasperate the rioters. In that case, you, Monsieur le Coadjuteur, who have such power over them and are at the same time friendly to us," said the queen, ironically, "will quiet them by bestowing your blessing upon them." "Perhaps it will be too late," said Gondy, still unmoved. "Perhaps I shall have lost all influence, while by giving up Broussel your Majesty will strike at the root of the sedition, and will gain the right to punish severely any revival of the revolt." "Have I not, then, that right?" cried the queen. "If you have it, use it," replied Gondy. "Peste!" said D'Artagnan to Porthos. "There is a man after my own heart. Oh, if he were minister, and I were his D'Artagnan, instead of belonging to that beast of a Mazarin, what fine things we would do together." "Yes," said Porthos. The queen made a sign for everyone, except Mazarin, to quit the room, and Gondy bowed, as if to leave with the rest. "Stay, sir," said Anne to him. "Good," thought Gondy. "She is going to yield. She is going to have him killed," said D'Artagnan to Porthos. "But at all events it shall not be by me. I swear to heaven, on the contrary, that if they fall upon him, I will fall upon them." "And I too," said Porthos. "Good," muttered Mazarin. Sitting down, "we shall soon see something startling." The queen's eyes followed the retreating figures, and when the last had closed the door, she turned away. It was evident that she was making unnatural efforts to subdue her anger. She fanned herself, smelled at her vinaigrette, and walked up and down. Gondy, who began to feel uneasy, examined the tapestry with his eyes, touched the coat of mail which he wore under his long gown, and felt from time to time to see if the handle of a good Spanish dagger, which was hidden under his cloak, was well within reach. "And now," at last said the queen, "now that we are alone, repeat your counsel, Monsieur le Coadjuteur." "It is this, madam, that you should appear to have reflected and publicly acknowledge an error which constitutes the extra strength of a strong government. Release Brousel from prison and give him back to the people." "Oh," cried Anne, "to humble myself thus, am I or am I not the queen? This screaming mob, are they or are they not my subjects? Have I friends? Have I guards? Ah, by Notre Dame! As Queen Catherine used to say," continued she, excited by her own words, "rather than give up this infamous Brousel to them, I will strangle him with my own hands." And she sprang toward Gondy, whom assuredly at that moment she hated more than Brousel, with outstretched arms. The coadjutor remained immovable, and not a muscle of his face was discomposed. Only his glance flashed like a sword in returning the furious looks of the queen. "He were a dead man," said the Gascon, "if there were still a Vitry at the court, and if Vitry entered at this moment. But for my part, before he could reach the good prelate, I would kill Vitry at once. The cardinal would be infinitely pleased with me." "Hush!" said Porthos. "Listen." "Madam," cried the cardinal, seizing hold of it and drawing her back, "Madam, what are you about?" Then he added in Spanish, "And are you mad? You, a queen to quarrel like a washerwoman? And do you not perceive that in the person of this priest is represented the whole people of Paris, and that it is dangerous to insult him at this moment? And if this priest wished it, in an hour you would be without a crown? Come, then, on another occasion you could be firm and strong, but today is not the proper time. Today, flatter and caress, or you are only a common woman." At the first words of this address D'Artagnan had seized Porthos's arm, which he pressed with gradually increasing force. When Mazarin ceased speaking, he said to Porthos in a low tone, "Never tell Mazarin that I understand Spanish, or I am a lost man, and you are also." "All right," said Porthos. This rough appeal, marked by the eloquence which characterized Mazarin when he spoke in Italian or Spanish, and which he lost entirely in speaking French, was uttered with such impenetrable expression that Gondy, clever physiognomist as he was, had no suspicion of its being more than a simple warning to be more subdued. The queen, on her part, thus chided, softened immediately and sat down, and in an almost weeping voice, letting her arms fall by her side, said, "Pardon me, sir, and attribute this violence to what I suffer. A woman, and consequently subject to the weaknesses of my sex, I am alarmed at the idea of civil war. A queen, accustomed to be obeyed, I am excited at the first opposition." "Madam," replied Gondy, bowing, "Your Majesty is mistaken in qualifying my sincere advice as opposition. Your Majesty has none but submissive and respectful subjects. It is not the queen with whom the people are displeased. They ask for Brousel and are only too happy, if you release him to them, to live under your government." Mazarin, who at the words, "It is not the queen with whom the people are displeased," had pricked up his ears, thinking that the coadjutor was about to speak of cries. Down with Mazarin, and pleased with Gondy's suppression of this fact, he said with his sweetest voice and his most gracious expression, "Madam, credit the coadjutor, who is one of the most able politicians we have. The first available cardinal's hat seems to belong already to his noble brow." "Ah, how much you have need of me, cunning rogue," thought Gondy. "And what will he promise us?" said D'Artagnan. "Peste! If he is giving away hats like that, Porthos, let us look out and both demand a regiment tomorrow. Corbleu, let the civil war last but 1 year, and I will have a constable's sword gilt for me." "And for me?" put in Porthos. "For you? I will give you the baton of the Marechal de la Meilleraie, who does not seem to be much in favor just now." "And so, sir," said the queen, "you are seriously afraid of a public tumult?" "Seriously," said Gondy, astonished at not having further advanced. "I fear that when the torrent has broken its embankment, it will cause fearful destruction." "And I," said the queen, "think that in such a case other embankments should be raised to oppose it. Go, I will reflect." Gondy looked at Mazarin, astonished, and Mazarin approached the queen to speak to her. But at this moment a frightful tumult arose from the square of the Palais Royal. Gondy smiled. The queen's color rose, and Mazarin grew even paler. "What is that again?" he asked. At this moment Comminges rushed into the room. "Pardon your majesty," he cried, "but the people have dashed the sentinels against the gates, and they are now forcing the doors. What are your commands?" "Listen, madam," said Gandhi. "The moaning of waves, the noise of thunder, the roaring of a volcano cannot be compared with the tempest of cries heard at that moment." "What are my commands?" said the queen. "Yes, for time presses. How many men have you about the Palais Royal?" 600. "Place 100 round the king, and with the remainder sweep away this mob for me." "Madam," cried Mazarin, "what are you about?" "Go," said the queen. Comminges went out with a soldier's passive obedience. At this moment a monstrous battering was heard. One of the gates began to yield. "Oh, madam," cried Mazarin, "you have ruined us all, the king, yourself, and me," at this cry from the soul of the frightened cardinal, and became alarmed in her turn and would have recalled Comminges. "It is too late," said Mazarin, tearing his hair. "Too late." The gale had given way. Hoarse shouts were heard from the excited mob. D'Artagnan put his hand to his sword, motioned to Porthos to follow his example. "Save the queen!" cried Mazarin to the coadjutor. Gondy sprang to a window and threw it open. He recognized Louviers at the head of a troop of about 3,000 or 4,000 men. Not a step further, he shouted. "The queen is signing." "What are you saying?" asked the queen. "The truth, madam," said Mazarin, placing a pen and a paper before her. "You must," then he added, "sign, and I implore you, I command you." The queen fell into a chair, took the pen and signed. The people, kept back by Louviers, had not made another step forward, but the awful murmuring, which indicates an angry people, continued. The queen had written, "The keeper of the prison at Saint-Germain will set Councillor Broussel at liberty," and she had signed it. The coadjutor, whose eyes devoured her slightest movements, seized the paper immediately the signature had been affixed to it, returned to the window and waved it in his hand. "This is the order," he said. All Paris seemed to shout with joy, and then the air resounded with the cries of "Long live Broussel! Long live the coadjutor! Long live the queen!" cried de Gondy. But the cries which replied to his were poor and few, and perhaps he but uttered it to make Anne of Austria sensible of her weakness. "And now that you have obtained what you want, go," said she. "Monsieur de Gondy." "Whenever Her Majesty has need of me," replied the coadjutor, bowing. "Her Majesty knows I am at her command." "Ah, cursed priest!" cried Anne, when he had retired, stretching out her arm to the scarcely closed door. "One day I will make you drink the dregs of the atrocious gall you have poured out on me today." Mazarin wished to approach her. "Leave me!" she exclaimed. "You are not a man," and she went out of the room. "It is you who are not a woman," muttered Mazarin. Then, after a moment of reverie, he remembered where he had left D'Artagnan and Porthos, and that they must have overheard everything. He knit his brows and went direct to the tapestry, which he pushed aside. The closet was empty. At the queen's last word, D'Artagnan had dragged Porthos into the gallery. Thither Mazarin went in his turn, and found the two friends walking up and down. "Why did you leave the closet, Monsieur d'Artagnan?" asked the cardinal. "Because," replied D'Artagnan, "the queen desired every one to leave, and I thought that this command was intended for us as well as the rest." "And you have been here since?" "About a quarter of an hour," said D'Artagnan, motioning to Porthos not to contradict him. Mazarin saw the sign and remained convinced that D'Artagnan had seen and heard everything, but he was pleased with his falsehood. "Decidedly, Monsieur d'Artagnan, you are the man I have been seeking. You may reckon upon me, and so may your friend." Then, bowing to the two Musketeers with his most gracious smile, he re-entered his closet more calmly, for on the departure of de Gondy the uproar had ceased as though by enchantment. Chapter 49. Misfortune refreshes the memory. Anne of Austria returned to her oratory, furious. "What?" she cried, wringing her beautiful hands. "What?" "The people have seen Monsieur de Condé, a prince of the blood royal, arrested by my mother-in-law, Maria de Medicis. They saw my mother-in-law, their former regent, expelled by the cardinal. They saw Monsieur de Vendôme, that is to say, the son of Henry IV, a prisoner of Vincennes, and whilst these great personages were imprisoned, insulted and threatened, they said nothing. And now for a Broussel, Good God! What, then, is to become a royalty? The Queen unconsciously touched here upon the exciting question. The people had made no demonstration for the princes, but they had risen for Browsel. They were taking the part of plebeian, and in defending Browsel, they instinctively felt they were defending themselves. During this time, Mazarin walked up and down the study, glancing from time to time at his beautiful Venetian mirror, starred in every direction. "Ah," he said, "it is sad, I know well, to be forced to yield thus, but, pshaw, we shall have our revenge. What matters about Browsel? It is a name, not a thing." Mazarin, clever politician as he was for once mistaken. Browsel was a thing, not a name. The next morning, therefore, when Browsel made his entrance into Paris in a large carriage, having his son Louviers at his side and Fouquet behind the vehicle, the people threw themselves his way in cries of "Long live Browsel! Long live our father!" resounded from all parts and was death to Mazarin's ears, and the cardinal's spies brought bad news from every direction, which greatly agitated the minister, but was calmly received by the queen. The latter seemed to be maturing in her mind some great stroke, a fact which increased the uneasiness of the cardinal, who knew the proud princess and dreaded much the determination of Anne of Austria. The coadjutor returned to Parliament more a monarch than king, queen, and cardinal, all three together. By his advice, a decree from Parliament summoned the citizens to lay down their arms and demolish the barricades. They now knew they required but 1 hour to take up arms again, and 1 night to reconstruct the barricades. Rochefort had returned to Chevalier Demers his 50 horsemen, less 2, missing at roll call. But the Chevalier was himself a heart of Frondist, and would hear nothing said of compensation. The mendicant had gone to his old place on the steps of St. Eustache, and was again distributing holy water with one hand, and asking alms with the other. No one could suspect that those 2 hands had been engaged with others in drawing out from the social edifice the keystone of royalty. Louviers was proud and satisfied. He had taken revenge on Mazarin, and had aided in his father's deliverance from prison. His name had been mentioned as a name of terror at the Palais Royal. Laughingly, he said to the councillor, restored to his family, "Do you think, father, that if now I should ask for a company the queen would give it to me?" D'Artagnan profited by this interval of calm to send away Raoul, whom he had great difficulty in keeping shut up during the riot, and who wished positively to strike a blow for one party or the other. Raoul had offered some opposition at first, but D'Artagnan made use of the Comte de la Fere's name, and after paying a visit to Madame de Chevreuse, Raoul started to rejoin the army. Rochefort alone was dissatisfied with the termination of affairs. He had written to the Duc de Beaufort to come, and the Duke was about to arrive, and he would find Paris tranquil. He went to the coadjutor to consult with him whether it would not be better to send word to the Duke to stop on the road. But Gondy reflected for a moment, and then said, "Let him continue his journey." "All is not then over?" asked Rochefort. "My dear Count, we have only just begun." "What induces you to think so?" "The knowledge that I have of the Queen's heart. She will not rest contented beaten." "Is she, then, preparing for a stroke?" "I hope so. Come, let us see what you know." "I know that she has written to the prince to return in haste from the army." "Ah, ha!" said Rochefort. "You are right. We must let Monsieur de Beaufort come." In fact, the evening after this conversation, the report was circulated that the Prince de Condé had arrived. It was a very simple, natural circumstance, and yet it created a profound sensation. It was said that Madame de Longueville, for whom the prince had more than a brother's affection, and in whom he had confided, had been indiscreet. His confidence had unveiled the sinister project of the queen. Even on the night of the prince's return, some citizens, bolder than the rest, such as the sheriffs, captains, and the quartermaster, went from house to house among their friends, saying, "Why do we not take the king and place him in the Hôtel de Ville? It is a shame to leave him to be educated by our enemies, who will give him evil counsel, whereas, brought up by the coadjutor, for instance, he would imbibe national principles and love his people." That night the question was secretly agitated, and on the morrow the gray and black cloaks, the patrols of armed shop people, and the bands of mendicants reappeared. The queen had passed the night in lonely conference with the prince, who had entered the oratory at midnight, and did not leave till 5 o'clock in the morning. At 5 o'clock, and went to the cardinal's room. If she had not yet taken any repose, He at least was already up. 6 days had already passed out of the 10 he had asked from Mordaunt. He was therefore occupied in revising his reply to Cromwell, when someone knocked gently at the door of communication with the Queen's apartments. Anne of Austria alone was permitted to enter by that door. The cardinal therefore rose to open it. The Queen was in a morning gown, but it became her still. For, like Diana of Poitiers and Ninon, Anne of Austria enjoyed the privilege of remaining ever beautiful. Nevertheless, this morning she looked handsomer than usual, for her eyes had all the sparkle inward satisfaction adds to expression. "What is the matter, madam?" said Mazarin uneasily. "You seem secretly elated." "Yes, Giulio," she said, "proud and happy, for I have found a means of strangling this hydra." "You are a great politician, my queen," said Mazarin. "Let us hear the means." And he hid what he had written by sliding the letter under a folio of blank paper. "You know," said the queen, "that they want to take the king away from me?" "Alas! Yes, and to hang me." "They shall not have a king." "Nor hang me." "Listen, I want to carry off my son from them, with yourself. I wish that this event, which on the day it is known will completely change the aspect of affairs, should be accomplished without the knowledge of any others but yourself, myself, and a third person." "And who is this third person?" "Monsieur le Prince." "He has come, then, as they told me?" "Last evening." "And you have seen him?" "He has just left me." "And will he aid this project?" "The plan is his own." "And Paris?" "He will starve it out and force it to surrender at discretion. The plan is not wanting in grandeur. I see but one impediment." "What is it?" "Impossibility. A senseless word. Nothing is impossible. On paper. In execution. We have money?" "A little," said Mazarin, trembling, lest he should ask to draw upon his purse. "Troops?" 5 or 6,000 men. "Courage?" "Plenty." "Then the thing is easy." "Oh, do think of it, Giulio. Paris, this odious Paris, waking up one morning without queen or king, surrounded, besieged, famished, having for its sole resource its stupid parliament, and their coadjutor with crooked limbs." "Charming, charming," said Mazarin. "I can imagine the effect. I do not see the means." "I will find the means myself." "You are aware it will be war, civil war, furious, devouring, implacable?" "Oh, yes, yes, war," said Anne of Austria. "Yes, I will reduce this rebellious city to ashes. I will extinguish the fire with blood. I will perpetuate the crime and punishment by making a frightful example. Paris, I detest, I loathe it." "Very fine, and you are now sanguinary. But take care. We are not in the time of Malatesta and Castruccio Castracani. You will get yourself decapitated, my beautiful queen, and that would be a pity." "You laugh." "Faintly. It is dangerous to go to war with a nation. Look at your brother monarch, Charles I. He is badly off, very badly. We are in France, and I am Spanish. So much the worse. I had much rather you were French and myself also. They would hate us both less." "Nevertheless, you consent?" "Yes, if the thing be possible. It is I who tell you so. Make preparations for departure." I am always prepared to go. Only, as you know, I never do go, and perhaps shall go this time as little as before." "In short, if I go, will you go too?" "I will try." "You torment me, Giulio, with your fears. And what are you afraid of then?" "Of many things." "What are they?" Mazarin's face, smiling as it was, became clouded. "And," said he, "you are but a woman, and as a woman you may insult men at your ease, knowing that you can do it with impunity. You accuse me of fear. I have not so much as you have. Since I do not fly as you do, against whom do they cry out? Is it against you, or against myself? Whom would they hang, yourself or me? Well, I could weather the storm, I whom, notwithstanding, you tax with fear, not with bravado. That is not my way. But I am firm. Imitate me. Make less hubbub and think more deeply. You cry very loud. You end by doing nothing. You talk of flying." Mazarin shrugged his shoulders, and taking the queen's hand, led her to the window. "Look," he said. "Well, said the queen, blinded by her obstinacy. "Well, what do you see from this window? If I am not mistaken, those are citizens, helmeted and mailed, armed with good muskets, as in time of the League, and whose eyes are so intently fixed on this window that they will see you if you raise that curtain much. And now come to the other side. What do you see? Creatures of the people, armed with halberds, guarding your doors. You will see the same at every opening from this palace, to which I should lead you. Your doors are guarded. The air holes of your cellars are guarded. And I could say to you, as that good Lord Rammy said to me of the Duc de Beaufort, you must be either bird or mouse to get out. He did get out, nevertheless. Do you think of escaping in the same way? I am a prisoner, then? Parbleu, said Mazarin, I have been proving it to you this last hour. And he quietly resumed his dispatch at the place where he had been interrupted, and, trembling with anger and scarlet with humiliation, left the room, shutting the door violently after her. Mazarin did not even turn around, when once more in her own apartment, and fell into a chair and wept, then suddenly struck with an idea. I am saved, she exclaimed, rising. Oh, yes, yes, I know a man who will find a means of taking me from Paris, a man I have too long forgotten. Then falling into a reverie, she added, however, with an expression of joy, ungrateful woman that I am, for 20 years I have forgotten this man, whom I ought to have made a marechal of France. My mother-in-law expended gold, caresses, dignities on Concini, who ruined her. The king made Vitry marechal of France for an assassination, while I have left in obscurity, in poverty, the noble D'Artagnan, who saved me. And running to a table, on which were paper, pens, and ink, she hastily began to write. Chapter 49. Misfortune refreshes the memory. And of Austria returned to her oratory, furious. What? She cried, wringing her beautiful hands. What? The people have seen Monsieur de Condé, a prince of the blood royal, arrested by my mother-in-law, Maria de Medicis. They saw my mother-in-law, their former regent, expelled by the cardinal. They saw Monsieur de Vendôme, that is to say, the son of Henry IV, a prisoner of Vincennes, and whilst these great personages were imprisoned, insulted and threatened, they said nothing. And now for a brousel. Good God! What, then, is to become a royalty? The queen unconsciously touched here upon the exciting question. The people had made no demonstration for the princes, but they had risen for brousel. They were taking the part of plebeian, and in defending brousel, they instinctively felt they were defending themselves. During this time, Mazarin walked up and down the study, glancing from time to time at his beautiful Venetian mirror, starred in every direction. Ah, he said, it is sad, I know well, to be forced to yield thus, but, pshaw, we shall have our revenge. What matters about brousel? It is a name, not a thing. Mazarin, clever politician as he was for once mistaken. Brousel was a thing, not a name. The next morning, therefore, when Brousel made his entrance into Paris in a large carriage, having his son Louviers at his side, and Fouquet behind the vehicle, the people threw themselves his way in cries of "Long live Brousel! Long live our father!" resounded from all parts and was death to Mazarin's ears, and the cardinal's spies brought bad news from every direction, which greatly agitated the minister, but was calmly received by the queen. The latter seemed to be maturing in her mind some great stroke, a fact which increased the uneasiness of the cardinal, who knew the proud princess and dreaded much the determination of Anne of Austria. The coadjutor returned to Parliament more a monarch than king, queen, and cardinal, all three together. By his advice, a decree from Parliament summoned the citizens to lay down their arms and demolish the barricades. They now knew they required but 1 hour to take up arms again, and 1 night to reconstruct the barricades. Rochefort had returned to Chevalier Demers his 50 horsemen, less 2, missing at roll call. But the Chevalier was himself a heart of Frondist, and would hear nothing said of compensation. The mendicant had gone to his old place on the steps of St. Eustache, and was again distributing holy water with one hand, and asking alms with the other. No one could suspect that those 2 hands had been engaged with others in drawing out from the social edifice the keystone of royalty. Louviers was proud and satisfied. He had taken revenge on Mazarin, and had aided in his father's deliverance from prison. His name had been mentioned as a name of terror at the Palais Royal. Laughingly, he said to the councillor, restored to his family. Do you think, father, that if now I should ask for a company, the queen would give it to me? D'Artagnan profited by this interval of calm to send away Raoul, whom he had great difficulty in keeping shut up during the riot, and who wished positively to strike a blow for one party or the other. Raoul had offered some opposition at first, but D'Artagnan made use of the Comte de la Fere's name, and after paying a visit to Madame de Chevreuse, Raoul started to rejoin the army. Rochefort alone was dissatisfied with the termination of affairs. He had written to the Duc de Beaufort to come, and the Duke was about to arrive, and he would find Paris tranquil. He went to the coadjutor to consult with him whether it would not be better to send word to the Duke to stop on the road. But Gondy reflected for a moment, and then said, "Let him continue his journey." "All is not then over?" asked Rochefort. "My dear Count, we have only just begun." "What induces you to think so?" "The knowledge that I have of the Queen's heart. She will not rest contented beaten." "Is she, then, preparing for a stroke?" "I hope so. Come, let us see what you know." "I know that she has written to the prince to return in haste from the army." "Ah, ha!" said Rochefort. "You are right. We must let Monsieur de Beaufort come." In fact, the evening after this conversation, the report was circulated that the Prince de Condé had arrived. It was a very simple, natural circumstance, and yet it created a profound sensation. It was said that Madame de Longueville, for whom the prince had more than a brother's affection, and in whom he confided, had been indiscreet. His confidence had unveiled the sinister project of the queen. Even on the night of the prince's return, some citizens, bolder than the rest, such as the sheriffs, captains, and the quartermaster, went from house to house among their friends, saying, "Why do we not take the king and place him in the Hôtel de Ville? It is a shame to leave him to be educated by our enemies, who will give him evil counsel, whereas, brought up by the coadjutor, for instance, he would imbibe national principles and love his people." That night the question was secretly agitated, and on the morrow the gray and black cloaks, the patrols of armed shop people, and the bands of mendicants reappeared. The queen had passed the night in lonely conference with the prince, who had entered the oratory at midnight, and did not leave till 5 o'clock in the morning. At 5 o'clock, and went to the cardinal's room. If she had not yet taken any repose, he at least was already up. 6 days had already passed out of the 10 he had asked from Mordaunt. He was therefore occupied in revising his reply to Cromwell, when someone knocked gently at the door of communication with the queen's apartments. Anne of Austria alone was permitted to enter by that door. The cardinal therefore rose to open it. The queen was in a morning gown, but it became her still, for, like Diana of Poitiers and Ninon, Anne of Austria enjoyed the privilege of remaining ever beautiful. Nevertheless, this morning she looked handsomer than usual, for her eyes had all the sparkle inward satisfaction adds to expression. "What is the matter, madam?" said Mazarin, uneasily. "You seem secretly elated." "Yes, Giulio," she said, "proud and happy, for I have found a means of strangling this hydra." "You are a great politician, my queen," said Mazarin. "Let us hear the means." And he hid what he had written by sliding the letter under a folio of blank paper. "You know," said the queen, "that they want to take the king away from me?" "Alas!" "Yes, and to hang me." "They shall not have a king." "Nor hang me." "Listen, I want to carry off my son from them, with yourself. I wish that this event, which on the day it is known will completely change the aspect of affairs, should be accomplished without the knowledge of any others but yourself, myself, and a third person." "And who is this third person?" "Monsieur le Prince." "He has come, then, as they told me?" "Last evening." "And you have seen him?" "He has just left me." "And will he aid this project?" "The plan is his own." "And Paris?" "He will starve it out and force it to surrender at discretion. The plan is not wanting in grandeur. I see but one impediment." "What is it?" "Impossibility. A senseless word. Nothing is impossible. On paper. In execution. We have money?" "A little," said Mazarin, trembling, lest he should ask to draw upon his purse. "Troops?" 5 or 6,000 men. "Courage?" "Plenty." "Then the thing is easy." "Oh, do think of it, Giulio. Paris, this odious Paris, waking up one morning without queen or king, surrounded, besieged, famished, having for its sole resource its stupid parliament and their coadjutor with crooked limbs. Charming, charming, said Mazarin. I can imagine the effect. I do not see the means. I will find the means myself. You are aware it will be war, civil war, furious, devouring, implacable? Oh, yes, yes, war, Senate of Austria. Yes, I will reduce this rebellious city to ashes. I will extinguish the fire with blood. I will perpetuate the crime and punishment by making a frightful example. Paris, I detest, I loathe it. Very fine, and you are now sanguinary. But take care. We are not in the time of Malatesta and Castruccio Castracani. You will get yourself decapitated, my beautiful queen, and that would be a pity. You laugh. Faintly. It is dangerous to go to war with a nation. Look at your brother monarch, Charles I. He is badly off, very badly. We are in France, and I am Spanish. So much the worse. I had much rather you were French and myself also. They would hate us both less. Nevertheless, you consent? Yes, if the thing be possible. It is I who tell you so. Make preparations for departure. I am always prepared to go. Only, as you know, I never do go, and perhaps shall go this time as little as before. In short, if I go, will you go too? I will try. You torment me, Giulio, with your fears. And what are you afraid of then? Of many things. What are they? Mazarin's face, smiling as it was, became clouded. And, said he, you are but a woman, and as a woman you may insult men at your ease, knowing that you can do it with impunity. You accuse me of fear. I have not so much as you have. Since I do not fly as you do, against whom do they cry out? Is it against you, or against myself? Whom would they hang, yourself or me? Well, I can weather the storm, I whom, notwithstanding, you tax with fear, not with bravado. That is not my way. But I am firm. Imitate me. Make less hubbub and think more deeply. You cry very loud. You end by doing nothing. You talk of flying. Mazarin shrugged his shoulders, and taking the queen's hand, led her to the window. Look, he said. Well, said the queen, blinded by her obstinacy. Well, what do you see from this window? If I am not mistaken, those are citizens, helmeted and mailed, armed with good muskets, as in time of the League, and whose eyes are so intently fixed on this window that they will see you if you raise that curtain much. And now come to the other side. What do you see? Creatures of the people, armed with halberds, guarding your doors. You will see the same at every opening from this palace, to which I should lead you. Your doors are guarded. The air holes of your cellars are guarded. And I could say to you, as that good Lord Ramy said to me of the Duc de Beaufort, you must be either bird or mouse to get out. He did get out, nevertheless. Do you think of escaping in the same way? I am a prisoner, then? Parbleu, said Mazarin. I have been proving it to you this last hour. And he quietly resumed his dispatch at the place where he had been interrupted, and, trembling with anger and scarlet with humiliation, left the room, shutting the door violently after her. Mazarin did not even turn around, when once more in her own apartment, and fell into a chair and wept, then suddenly struck with an idea. I am saved, she exclaimed, rising. Oh, yes, yes. I know a man who will find a means of taking me from Paris, a man I have too long forgotten. Then falling into a reverie, she added, however, with an expression of joy, ungrateful woman that I am, for 20 years I have forgotten this man, whom I ought to have made a marechal of France. My mother-in-law expended gold, caresses, dignities on Concini, who ruined her. The king made Vitry marechal of France for an assassination, while I have left in obscurity, in poverty, the noble D'Artagnan, who saved me. And running to a table, on which were paper, pens, and ink, she hastily began to write.